You're rounding out the time. Kids are graduating next week and the week after. Your summer is about to start. And once you make it into summer, we get to the dog days. We're doing lists. We're talking golf. We'll get a little tennis stuff going on. But before you know it, we'll be in college football season. And you know how much I love the lists that are coming out. We're going to get into another one or two of those today. NBA playoffs in full swing. I put a poll question out about that. It's not it's not a poll question. It's just an open-ended question. And I'd like for you to respond to me at Real OC Sports or at 877-353-0700. There's a unique kind of quirk to this year's Final Four in the NBA. Three of the four franchises have never won an NBA championship. They have never won the Larry O'Brien. They don't have that trophy case piece. Now, your Oklahoma City, I think, gets more of a pass because OKC is a new franchise. But even when you're talking about the Seattle Supersonics, not exactly this dynasty when it comes to championships. So it's an interesting quirk of the field. And by the way, the Knicks are the team that does have championships or has a championship. And it's been a long time. So from a actual living fan relevancy standpoint, the Knicks haven't won a championship in the lifetime of the people that are buying tickets, tuning into these games for the most part. So there's some novelty to this Final Four in the NBA. And the question it brings up for me, 877-353-0700, are you more of a believer when you see this, that it is possible for the Utah Jazz at some point? James, what do you think?
I am. That is where I fall on this. You look at the last 5 years, OC. Yes, the Lakers won in the bubble. That doesn't give Jazz fans much hope. So the Lakers winning a championship. Yes, the Celtics won last year. Another one that doesn't give Jazz fans and small market teams much hope. Warriors won a couple years ago. That's another one. But then you also had the Bucks in there. That had 50 years in between championships. And then you had the Nuggets, who had never been to the finals, that won 2 years ago. So you've got a couple of those. You got the Raptors, if you go back a year prior to that sample size I just brought up. They've only been a franchise since the Jazz last went to the finals. So 3 out of the last 6 champions, or is it 7, whatever the math comes out to, are small market teams that either had never won or had been 50 years since they'd won before. So I think that, yes, for me, it does give me, the Jazz fan in me, some hope that the Jazz can eventually do it. I think that it should give all Jazz fans some hope that anybody can win a championship. The other thing, we hear Gordy talk about it all the time. Since 2019, we've had a different champion every single year. And that bodes well for even though, like I said, the Warriors are in there, the Celtics and Lakers are in there, it gives you hope. It should give hope to every franchise that the league is in a place right now that if you put together a good roster, you have a chance to win a championship.
Thunder, Timberwolves, Pacers, Knicks.
Yeah.
You could make an argument, if you care about such things, that this is like the nightmare of the NBA ratings-wise. Now, the Knicks being the outlier that I think will still draw a lot of attention.
Oh, absolutely.
And look, we were
Stephen
talking
A.
about
will make sure of it.
We were please. We were talking about this.
Orange and blue skies.
That
right?
somehow, Porter Larson is a Knicks fan, a real one.
Mm-hmm.
Spence obviously has ties to the Knicks and is a Knicks fan.
Yeah.
I was a Knicks fan at one point in my life for unexplained reasons. Affection for Georgetown Hoya basketball and then Patrick Ewing because of that. And, we're at Salt Lake City, Utah. There's 4 people in this building that want to see the Knicks win the finals.
And then another guy who doesn't work in the building every day, but listeners are very familiar with him, is on both this show and The Drive with Spence Checketts. Tony Jones is also a Knicks fan.
Now Tony's more of a Knicks fan than any of us.
Yes,
you can tell because when he even as a professional sports writer, when he talks about the Knicks, what does he say?
It's a we.
He says
it's an
we.
us.
He says we don't have the depth that, and that means
that's the best thing.
He's dyed in the wool.
That's the best thing about Tony Jones, because he's not just that way with the Knicks. He's that way when he talks about the Mets. Those are probably his two biggest fandoms.
Well, and the Commanders.
And in the Commanders, he talks about that way about the Commanders, and then he talks that way about Georgetown. We just don't get around to that very much because Georgetown, unfortunately, has been awful of late. But he is total media professional when he's talking about any other team, but when it comes to his teams that he's rooted for since childhood, it's it's us. He's very relatable in that way. And there's so many, we talk about this a lot as people who are sports media professionals. We talk about how fandom dies. Tony Jones is the exception to that.
Well, there's loyalty all the way. That's just like a core part of his personality.
Yeah.
And, you got to look at the fan bases of again, maybe not the Knicks, although there is something to that with the Knicks as well, because when there was not winning basketball being played at Madison Square Garden, the sticker shock you experience when you want to, even like as a tourist, go and see something at Madison Square Garden, it's insane. If you're a real fan of the Knicks, trying to afford to support that team, first of all, you got to live in New York, which is disgusting. Everything is more expensive there. When I say everything is more expensive there, you've traveled there most likely if you're listening to the show. I mean, everything is more expensive there. You go in to the corner store and you buy a pack of gum. It is more expensive there. And then you try to go like, oh, you know what? We're in New York. Let's go see a Knicks game. Let's go see a Rangers game. Let's go just experience a sports event at the Mecca. And you walk up to the ticket booth, or you more likely now you pull up an app on your phone, and you're just like, what? No wonder everyone in this market hates Jimmy Dolan. Because it's like we complain in Salt Lake City about the price of trying to support a really rough Jazz team. Imagine if it costs at least double. You just wouldn't do it, right?
And until 3 or 4 years ago, it was really rough Knicks teams almost every year.
Exactly. So that the fan bases that have been supporting these franchises that are now in the Final Four, you got to kind of look as a Jazz fan, if that's what you are, and say, who am I most like here? All right? The Minnesota Timberwolves. How many times have the Minnesota Timberwolves really had something to root for? And it's not a consistent thing, right?
No, you
go back to the KG days.
Yeah.
Maybe you really liked Jimmy Butler when he was in a Wolves uniform. Maybe you're an Isaiah Ryder type fan. I don't know.
Maybe you liked Karl Anthony Towns. Oh, conflict. He's on the Knicks now.
Can't. No, it wasn't. You didn't like Cat.
I don't think there are Cat fans, are there? No, like the T-Wolves are a great one to bring up if Jazz fans are looking for a franchise that's most like them. The T-Wolves are a great one to bring up, other than the fact that the T-Wolves just had like a 20-year, or they had like a 16-year playoff drought. Uh-huh. That has not happened with the Jazz. But no championships, really good teams that have gotten close but not really gotten over the hump. Jazz have been to finals. T-Wolves have not been to the finals.
And
that's
by the
one
way,
of the other differentiators. But
there's similarities in the way that the league and the players in the league regard Minneapolis to Salt Lake City. Now, Minneapolis is not as whitewashed of a town as Salt Lake City is, which does matter in the NBA. But, I mean, I keep referencing this back. You will hear this year's Timberwolves team, guys on this year's squad, especially Julius Randle. No, who am I thinking of?
I think
is it
Julius Randle?
No, it was Julius Randle.
Saying nice things about Minnesota and Minneapolis.
Look, man, he was like, I didn't want to come here. And then I brought my family here, and I realized, oh, this is like kind of quiet, easy living. There's good people here, and that's what the outward perception of Minneapolis by NBA franchises, NBA players, which is the most important thing here, is not the first reaction. Oh yeah, sweet, I want to go play there, and then you kind of have to. It's that stupid thing that I always reject when everyone tells you it's an acquired taste. Everyone that is an avid coffee drinker, oh, it's an acquired taste. Everyone who loves beer, oh, it's an acquired taste. And I'm just like, Why would I spend the time acquiring the taste?
You know what that sounds like? That sounds like not worth it to me.
That sounds like not good, and then you pretend it's good until it actually is good to you. And that's, I mean, we don't like to admit it here in Salt Lake. Salt Lake is an acquired taste for some of these people that move in, or in the case of NBA players and now hockey players, that like you're forced to move in.
Yeah.
That's such a weird thing about sports is you don't, in most cases, obviously free agency is a different deal. In most cases, like with the draft and with trades, someone's like, this is where you are going to go live for half of your year at least. Now, you could choose, because we have provided you with the means, you could choose to live somewhere else when it's not in season.
Well, and only half of your home games are here. Half of your games every year. I mean, it is
most
a
of
lot,
these people, most of these guys have families.
Yeah.
Right? Even in the NBA, which is a very young league, a lot of these guys, a lot of the important players, the ones that you're building your franchise around, have kids, have significant others, have wives, and like you most of the time want that person or those persons to be with you where you're at. So I look at this field in the NBA playoffs, Western Conference and Eastern Conference finals, and look, the New York Knicks, the Jazz never get to compare themselves as a franchise to the New York Knicks because it is so opposite of, I mean, that is the number one media market. That is, even when they're not good, people are going to talk about them. When they are good, people are going to over-index and talk about them. But the Pacers, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, these are all places that you could go and we could do that anonymous survey of coaches and players in the NBA and say, where are, like, give me the bottom 5 cities that you would want to end up in. And unfortunately, in most cases, Salt Lake City is going to appear in that, right? And I bet you Oklahoma City appears on a lot, and I guarantee Minneapolis appears on dang near all of them. And Indianapolis should, because I've been to that town several times. Not great.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been there once on a work trip for a previous job. Yeah, I don't necessarily care to go back again. I'd go back to watch a Colts game because I'm a Colts fan. I don't see any other reason to do that after only being there once.
So there's a I don't know, a glimmer of hope potentially represented in this year's NBA field that, well, why not us? If they can do it, why not us?
Yeah.
And that's when you really have to get into the why not us. Because if you're going to say there's commonalities in what the Jazz and the Timberwolves are, the Jazz and the Thunder are, the Jazz and the Pacers are, which of course you can, the next thing you should do is say, well, what are they doing differently than us? Because there was a long time that Minneapolis was a no man's land, a wasteland in NBA basketball. And even having generationally great player like a Kevin Garnett wasn't enough to get them to this point. Wasn't enough to get them to the precipice of an NBA championship, at least not in the believable sense that we feel right now. I mean, I look at Minnesota right now and I say they absolutely can win the Western Conference, and they absolutely can, as a rested team going in with a sort of an exotic big man lineup sometimes. They can be a big, big problem for even an MVP like SGA, or a guy who may very well win the MVP award in SGA and that Thunder team.
And the Thunder are a team that likes to get out on the break, and they get a lot of deflections and steals and dunks, layups, runouts, those kind of things. We've seen the T-Wolves struggle with turnovers, so that could be a recipe for disaster. But if they take care of the ball, the T-Wolves play, they certainly get out on the fast break as much as the next team does too, but not quite as much as the Thunder. And because they have that bigger lineup, they have an ability, if they take care of the ball, to slow the game down a little bit, which works against what the Thunder like to do. So they can use those kinds of things to their advantage to try to win this series. If they're not able to, Thunder probably win this series. Even if they are able to, the Thunder are a more talented team. They probably win this series, but the T-Wolves have a really good shot to do it.
But back to the point, since we're looking at this through a Utah Jazz lens, you say, okay, but what have they done differently, or what are they doing differently in Minnesota to make this happen? And one of the weird things, right? One of the interesting things, at least for me, the Timberwolves sacrificed a lot of the future for the now. And it was not regarded as, I think, a universally wise trade that the Jazz benefited from by getting a bunch of picks. They sent Rudy Gobert, who is a defensive player of the year, multiple-time defensive player of the year, is obviously very valuable in NBA basketball, but is not considered a superstar that is going to drive you to a championship, right? Now, Minnesota had the luxury of being like, well, we have Ant-Man. What do we need to do to surround Anthony Edwards with the supporting cast? And they made a bold, brash, wild move and brought in at least a guy that the rest of the NBA was probably like 50-50 going, what are you guys doing? What are you sure that's the move you want to make? I mean, how many Jazz fans, myself included, even though you're not supposed to call yourself a fan when you're in the media, how many Jazz observers looked at that trade and were just like, that crafty, wily Jazz front office, they just fleeced the Minnesota Timberwolves. Minnesota's going to regret this one. What a bunch of schmucks.
I thought by this year it would be that trade for the T-Wolves, from the T-Wolves perspective, would look like a disaster. I thought it wouldn't take even this long for that to be look like a bad trade for the T-Wolves. They're in their second straight Western Conference Finals.
They're their second straight Western Conference Final, and I think this year in a more believable position to make it to the finals, at least for me. And, Rudy has been a big part of that. Whether you love him or hate him, Rudy's been a big part of that.
I think there's more love, a lot more love than hate in this market.
Absolutely.
Than other markets, for sure.
Yeah, I say that because I know Shaquille O'Neal is a big listener to the show.
Yes, of course.
So, Shaq, whether you love him or you hate him, Rudy Gobert is a big part of this. So what are the Timberwolves doing differently than the Utah Jazz? Because they're not like crazy dissimilar from a franchise model standpoint. What are the Thunder doing differently than the Utah Jazz? What are the Pacers doing differently than the Utah Jazz? These are small to mid-market teams that have similar ownership assets for the most part. So what are those franchises doing differently than the Utah Jazz? And everyone's on a different timeline, and I'm not sitting here telling everyone that, hey, the Jazz need to win now. It has to be right now. But you have to look at yourself and say, okay, did Oklahoma City ever tank to try to get the roster that they have now? Did the Pacers ever deliberately tank to try to get the roster they have now? Did Minnesota deliberately tank to get the roster they have now? That is the most fresh, top of mind question that I want to ask about the differences between the franchise, because the similarities are obvious enough. What are they doing that we are not doing? What is that city doing that my city is not doing? And guess what? I refuse. I mean, I reject outright the notion that nobody wants to play here, and that's why the Utah Jazz are not going to win NBA championships. Is it more difficult? Do you have to thread the needle in a different way? Sure. But I promise you that Indianapolis is not a sexy city for young stars in the NBA. And I guarantee Oklahoma City is not. Have you ever been to Oklahoma City? Have you ever been to the state of Oklahoma, period? My parents live there right now. Have you been to Oklahoma?
I have not.
It is not great. It's not scenically beautiful like Utah is.
I think Salt Lake doesn't have a ton of skyscrapers. I think there's more skyscrapers in Salt Lake City than Oklahoma City by a good amount.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Maybe it's the same amount.
But I also don't think that there's a lot of NBA players that are just like, how many skyscrapers you got?
Yeah, I know, right. They're looking at nightlife. They're looking at
And by the way, do they still look at nightlife as the number one thing?
Maybe they don't.
Because that nightlife comment was 20 years ago.
Well, it was 8, but yeah.
It was 8 years ago?
Yes, that was when the Warriors played with Gordon Hayward.
It felt like 20 years ago.
It was a long time ago.
Okay, so
3 different iterations of Jazz teams. Yeah.
And listen, nightlife is what it is. You're not going to find stellar nightlife in Salt Lake City, Utah. If your franchise is unable to convince good players that this is a nice place to be because you don't have a good enough club, then you know what you should do as an owner? Build a damn club.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not even a joke.
Yeah, why not?
Like
you've referenced to me off air the way Austin, Texas has kind of grown, and a lot of that is because Joe Rogan has made his home there, and he built the best comedy club in Austin, the best comedy club in the nation. A lot of people think in Austin, Texas, and the growth has come on from there.
What's the old line from Field of Dreams?
If you build it, he will come.
People will come, Ray. I promise you, this is not something I wrote down in my notes. This is not something I even thought we'd get into today. But if you really are, if there's a fear on a franchise level that, you know what, even if we get the right pick, even if we had gotten the number 1 overall pick, keeping that guy here, like we weren't able to keep Gordon Hayward, we weren't able to keep Donovan Mitchell, we weren't able to keep everyone that we wanted to keep here. If the thing that is missing in keeping somebody here is nightlife, then take $10 million and build the coolest nightclub in the world and put it in Salt Lake City. If you build it, they will come. You know how many people would just be like, what? You guys have like a super cool you have a super cool nightclub?
Put it in the Gateway.
With a water slide in it? Let me check that out. I don't know. But that is an easier thing to fix than anyone thinks it. Like, I used to work in the quote-unquote nightlife scene in Salt Lake City. Now, this is years and years ago. But guess what? People would come out to the club. It would be lines around the block. They would be dancing. They would be drinking, if that's what you're into, right? There were plenty of attractive people of all shapes and sizes. Like, we have all of those things here in Salt Lake City. Don't give me that excuse as to why your franchise cannot be successful. Because Minneapolis is Minneapolis. I went there for a job interview October 8th. A few years ago, and it was snowing, and it was like 10 degrees. My wife was with me. She looked at me, and she said, please don't make me come here. You think that any of these NBA guys might have a similar experience where they bring their girlfriend or their wife with them, and they're just like, by the way, the NBA season is through the winter months?
Yeah.
You know,
if you make the playoffs, then it might be pleasantly warm.
The downtown buildings in Minneapolis are all connected by skyways. Did you know this? Like, the building next to your building and the building next to that and next to that, they have they're skyways. They're little sidewalks that go indoors like they do in Las Vegas.
So they can stay inside.
So you can stay inside, because walking outside on the sidewalk in Minneapolis is brutal when it's January and it's 4 degrees outside with a wind chill of -10. You know what they do with the unhoused population in Minneapolis? They patrol and they scoop them up off the street out of their tents and their sleeping bags, because they will pass away in the cold if you let them stay outside. It's not exactly it's not Miami, okay? And Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Timberwolves franchise is not sitting back right now and just, well, look, hey, we're never going to get that stuff here. We can't have nice things because it's the NBA, and they need nightlife, and they need – stop it.
They need warmth.
Oklahoma City, Indianapolis, and Minneapolis are not significantly more appealing places for an NBA player to be, to work, to play than Salt Lake City, Utah. They're just not. So if they can do it, so can you. What are they doing differently than you are doing? What is their ownership? What is their front office doing differently? That's an important question to ask yourself, to ask your owner. If you're a season ticket holder, write to your senator or whatever. Like, hey, what's going on here? What are they doing differently? What is our expectation? What is our plan for this franchise? If it's to continue sucking and hope for good draft picks, all right, I guess. But this fan base is not going to tolerate that much longer, especially when other fan bases who had their sufferings are now getting their nice things. When the patience of Timberwolves fans is, I guess, starting to pay off, and when the Pacers fan base and when the Thunder fan base is out there, it's easier for me, at least, when it's just like, well, yeah, of course, they're the Warriors. Yeah, of course, they're the Lakers. You can't compete with that. But that's not who is winning right now. I'm a prisoner of this moment, James. Who's winning right now, today in the NBA, are teams that are doing the same things you can or should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest reason why things are this way in the NBA right now, OC, is the new CBA. If you're an NBA fan, you've certainly heard the word apron more than you thought you would in sports talk radio and read it in sports columns and articles way more often than you ever thought you would. These aprons that mean more luxury tax, higher luxury tax money than ever before. They are discouraging even the wealthiest franchises from keeping their teams together because the bill is just way too high. What that means is, yes, that makes it hard. That also makes it hard for the Utah Jazz to keep good teams together if they ever get to that point again. But it means that the dynasty, like 8-10 year dynasties, the age of those are over as long as this CBA is the way it is, which means that any team in the league, if you field a good team, field a good roster, can win an NBA championship. We're seeing that play out in front of our eyes here with this, as you said, OC, with these Western and Eastern Conference Finals fields.
I got it. Okay, a good text came in. Diversity and culture. Utah is a pretty non-diverse area. Okay, that's a problem? I just looked up the ethnic demographics of the other 4 cities that are now in the NBA Finals. Actually, I did it for 3 of the 4 because New York, we know, is among the most diverse places on the planet, right? Oklahoma City, 49.5% white or European American, 21% Hispanic or Latino, 13% black or African American, 4.6% Asian. You're talking about, like is the case in Minneapolis, is the case in Indianapolis. You're talking about a very, now Utah has the lowest per capita black population of all these places we're talking about, but I don't think that is the only reason why people don't want to be here either. I appreciate the text coming in like diversity is a problem here. Salt Lake City is about as white as Minneapolis is. Want to have on these airways, but it's an important point probably to bring up when it is a point that's brought up all the time and even has been brought up by stars on the Utah Jazz franchise, like Donovan Mitchell. But at the end of the day, the numbers are not as different as everyone likes to make it out to be. Yes, Salt Lake City has the highest white density in the NBA. If that's a real reason why people don't want to play in Salt Lake City, and that's going to be your excuse as to why you can't be a championship franchise, then I guess Minneapolis could do the same. They're in your same neighborhood. Minneapolis could do the same thing, but they're not. So the similarities matter, the differences and what they're doing strategically matter even more. All right, we'll get off this. We'll get to some NHL discussion. NHL playoffs, the Toronto Maple Leafs once again collapse down the stretch. Game 7 in a series. They just can't do it. Toronto hasn't won a Stanley Cup since the original 6 era. Ouch. We'll talk Stanley Cup playoffs with Tom Callahan in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Could this be his final game as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs? Unrestricted free agent Mitch Marner. Score! Marchand, the shot deflected in by Luostarinen. It is now 4-1 Florida.
Marchand again. Just gets this puck into an area. The goal scorer gets support from Lundell, and then a simple play from Marchand.
That highlight courtesy of TNT Sports, Kenny Alpert and Eddie Olczyk on the call. Florida Panthers, 6-1 victory in Game 7 over the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Leafs fan misery continues. Game 1 of Panthers Hurricanes is tomorrow night. Game 1 of the Western Conference Final between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars is Wednesday night. We are your exclusive home of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Every game of the conference finals and the Stanley Cup finals right here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Tom Callahan, NHL Insider, joins us now to talk about these playoffs. Tom, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. It's been an interesting playoff so far.
Toronto, 7 straight Game 7s lost. That ties an NHL record that I didn't even know we were keeping track of. How cursed does this Toronto Maple Leafs franchise feel right now?
So, I mean, for those who don't understand how deep the misery is for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they haven't won a cup since 1967, and 1967 was the last year that there were only 6 teams in the NHL. The next year they went to 12. The Leafs have not won a cup since. So the misery extends pretty deep, and after Game 5, and here's the crazy part, Sean. I don't understand this. Toronto lost Game 5 spectacularly in Game 7, probably even worse, on home ice that way. Yet they won Game 6 in Florida looking really good. So I don't understand how you can flop so hard twice in front of your home fans. And, I mean, they had Florida, or they could have had Florida. They had home ice. Everything seemed to be going their way, and they just could not get it done. That's a pretty big choke job.
The wild thing about it is when you talk about a franchise, we're not talking about the same group of guys. We're not talking about the same coach. We're not talking about the same players. And somehow the bad luck, the misery, the curse extends on a franchise city level. And I guess in this case now, Canadian fans, they've got the hopes are still alive with Edmonton, but it's been a long time since Canada lifted a cup or any. So with the final 4 teams remaining in the field, and based on what you've seen in these playoffs, have your expectations changed? Did Florida convince you that they, with this demolition in Game 7, that they're now the team to beat? How are you handicapping this small, narrowing field?
It's funny. You look at Carolina, and I think Carolina has been very opportunistic to get to the final. Not that they're a bad team, and none of the 4 teams left are bad teams, okay? But they got a beat-up and injured New Jersey team, and then I think they really got a emotionally and physically exhausted Washington team, beat them, both of them, 4-1. So now they move on. Florida has had to battle against Toronto to get here, and I think Toronto is a very, very talented team, but Florida – at some point in that series against the Leafs, remembered that they're Florida. Sergei Bobrovsky, their goaltender, remembered that he can be playoff Bob and can really shut down opposing teams. So that's dangerous. I had thought Florida, even though they were the 3rd seed coming in, I thought Florida was primed to put together another run. I think they're getting past Carolina. And then Dallas. Dallas has been my biggest surprise of the playoffs. I'm not going to lie. I thought Dallas was pretty dead, limping into the playoffs. They lost a bunch of games at the end of the season. They had some injuries they were dealing with. They did not look good. But that 7-game series against Colorado, instead of Colorado knocking them out, seemed to wake them up. And now Mikko Rantanen, who really put on a clinic against his old team, has continued to put on clinics and look great in the Winnipeg series. I think I give Dallas a slight edge coming in against Edmonton here, even though Edmonton made the Cup final last year. Jake Ottinger and Connor Hellebuyck dueled in the last series. I think those are the 2 best American-born goaltenders out there right now. And maybe of the remaining playoff goaltenders, I think Ottinger is probably second to Bobrovsky. So I like Dallas's goaltending a lot. Edmonton has actually kind of rotated guys here in the postseason. They started with Stuart Skinner. He got knocked out for a little while, and then Chet Pickard came in his place, started winning them some games. They turned it around. Well, then Pickard got hurt. They had to go back to Skinner. So I'm actually going to be interested to see what Dallas is going to do for a starter in Game 1 come Wednesday night. So that one's interesting to me. And Carolina, goaltending's not been an issue for Carolina at all. But my question is just going to be for Carolina is can they play well enough defensively to absorb how physical Florida is going to be and prevent them from just overwhelming, the Hurricanes. So that's goaltending's not Carolina's weak point by any stretch, but I just think Florida plays a game that just grinds teams to dust.
Tom Callahan talking Stanley Cup playoffs here on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 792.1 FM. The Stanley Cup playoffs have been incredible, and I encourage anyone, even the most casual of hockey fans, find them, tune in, watch the incredibly high level of hockey being played, especially as the field has really narrowed itself down and you're into the Final Four now. The Frozen Four is what we call it in the college world, at least. But maybe more relevant, well, not maybe, certainly more relevant to Utah Mammoth fans, Utah Hockey Club fans, are the World Championships going on right now, because you've got some Mammoth guys skating and playing incredibly well in this tournament. What do you think of Team USA's chances here, and especially what we've seen from Keller and Kesselring and Cooley and all these guys?
You know what? I think we absolutely, number one, Badger's been playing great for Czechia. So as far as he's the only goaltender in the organization that's there. The cool thing that's coming up here, if you've been following along, is in the B pool, which the USA is in, as well as Czechia. I think it's going to come down to head-to-head between the U.S. and Czechia here to see who ends up on top, which is very exciting. That's going to be fantastic. And also, we expected Clayton Keller to do well. He's been the captain of the American squad. He's done a fantastic job. But Logan Cooley, I think, is having a little bit of a coming-out party here. He's currently inside the top 20 in scoring. He's actually tied for 17th now. A couple of guys moved past him with the off day for Team USA. Keller's got 8 points. They've been playing on the same line. I think this is Logan Cooley's coming out party here, and this should really excite Mammoth fans for next year. The way they're playing right now, and not to dismiss any of the other guys that are over there, but really the guy I'm the most excited for in the world right now is Logan Cooley.
Is there a significant difference in play style in this World Championship tournament and what these guys are going to experience through the NHL?
A little bit. It's not quite as physical. There's a little bit more room, especially on an international-sized ice sheet, which for those who don't know is 15 feet wider. It's the same length, 200 feet, but it's 100 feet wide. So it's just harder because there's 7.5 extra feet on the wing to make physical contact with guys a lot. So players who are slick skating, smooth puck handlers like Keller, like Cooley, take advantage of that extra room and really are able to shine in that situation. So it is a little different. It does focus more on skill, and that's why I think they're coming to the fore.
So a coming out party for Logan Cooley is something I think we should all be excited about. But what does that look like on Mammoth Ice next year if he can build this confidence and apply whatever tips and tricks and the new stuff that he's really showed off in this tournament? What could it – I mean, are we talking about an extra 10 goals? Are we talking about an extra 10 points? Give me the optimistic outlook on what it would mean for the Mammoth if Logan Cooley just continues this growth.
Well, you've got to love where Cooley is because he's still on his entry-level contract. But that also means he's probably going to get paid relatively soon, just like we saw with Dylan Gunther. But can you imagine and right now the line also includes Connor Garland, who's another smaller but very skilled player, and they have really gelled for Team USA. You look at what he put up last year with 75 games, 65 points. That is not a bad season by any stretch, right? That's a really, really good year. But now if he's starting to creep up to the point where I think Cooley could challenge for leading scorer on this team, I think he could be a guy who can touch 80 points if he continues to grow and expand, which is crazy. He just turned 21. To think that he can already start playing at what is going to be approaching an elite level. Plus, you've got Gunther. Plus, you've got, all the guys we've been talking about here right along for this hockey team that it's incredible to think you could have Keller, you could still have Schmaltz for another year. And then you've got, some of the other guys who can crash and bang back there and make room for these guys. This could actually become an extremely dangerous offensive team. And if that's the case, and they're playing with puck possession, that is the key to it all. If you're going to generate offensive play with puck possession, if the physical guys are generating the space and getting the puck to the Coolies and Kellers of the world, I think the Mammoth become a playoff team next year.
Tom, we are getting closer and closer to the NHL draft where the Mammoth moved up from 14, where they were most likely to pick, to 4. Any further insight from the last time we talked into where you think they will go with that pick?
I think I don't think much has changed. It was interesting. We had on our Locked On Mammoth show, we had Will Scouch on, who is a great scout, looking at a lot of different things and talking about the different ways it could go. But you talk about what Utah Hockey Club needs and wants. And I always think you should take the best available player. That is absolutely what I think you should be doing. But to me, for the Utah Hockey Club, I don't know that there's much different. A lot of names that keep coming up. Hagens, if he's there, which I don't think he will be. I think he's gone third. Porter Martone seems to be the guy that would fit the best. And then there's maybe an Anton Frondell, who is a Swedish player who's been playing in the second Swedish league, which is a men's league, as opposed to playing in junior hockey. Might be a little more NHL ready. So depending on what the Utah Hockey Club is looking for, but he's going to be a wing. Martone might be able to play either side, but he's a couple of years away. But I just think Martone is maybe probably their target at this point, and seems to fit in the best.
Tom, you're the man. Appreciate you always joining me to talk these playoffs. Enjoy the rest of these games this week, and we'll talk again on Monday.
Oh, my goodness. It's going to be an exciting week. Thanks, as always, for having me on, Sean.
Tom Callahan, Locked On Utah Mammoth podcast, NHL Insider, and, of course, our friend of the program with all the NHL insight. You know what? I'll have to admit, I asked the question knowing that the physicality is a little bit different in international hockey on these World Championship tournaments. I didn't realize that it was tied to the difference in the ice sheet size. It's fun to learn that kind of stuff.
A little bit more of a mammoth ice sheet in the international game.
I see what you did there, James.
You could say OC.
And I don't like the fact that you did it, okay? And because you went there with the dad joke, what I'm going to do is I'm going to needle and punish you with the hot lunch topic. Shaquille O'Neal went on a podcast and he dropped a little tidbit that might make you think the NBA lottery is rigged. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Now's the right time to give your home a little facelift. We're all tied down to the 3-4% handcuff on our mortgages. You're not going to sell this place anytime soon. You want to maximize the beauty of your home. Even if you are going to sell it, you definitely want to maximize the curb appeal of your home. It gives the home a nice little facelift. New windows, Advanced Windows, the #1 window replacement company in the Western United States, and certainly right here in Salt Lake City, Utah. They are friends of the program. Nate Orchard, obviously the Utah football legend, is the man behind the business. And Advanced Windows has been taking care of our listeners, been taking care of our insiders, been taking care of us. They will take care of you with $2,500 off 10 windows or more. They have window coverings. If you want to use the old windows you got in your home, but you want to spiff those up, make them look a little bit nicer, they could take care of the window coverings, the plantation shutters, the blinds, any of that stuff. What impresses me most about Advanced Windows, and we've gone down and we've toured the factory, the attention to detail that they pay on every step of the process. It's not just the stuff that gets you the Google review. It's the minutia on every single step, from the sales process to the installation to the warranty coverage, all the way down to, of course, windows nowadays, they're multiple panes of glass. They're dual pane windows, right? The gas that goes between those panes of windows is important. And instead of taking the shortcut and just getting the cheapest one that you could get, Nate has gone on trips to figure out which gas between the windows, I don't know, it's like boron or something, which gas is going to handle the temperature fluctuations of the Utah climate best. They're paying attention to the details so that you don't have to. AdvancedWindows.com. Tell them that OC sent you. $2,500 off 10 windows or more for our ESPN 700 listeners.
The eyes of your home, the windows.
Yeah.
That's what I've always said.
You've always said that?
Yeah, and the shutters. Yeah, the eyelashes of the home. You're welcome.
I don't like that. I don't like what you just did.
I don't like what you were just about to say about what Shaq said.
Yeah,
so
Shaq,
in your face.
Okay, first of all, one of the great blessings of inside the NBA and of guys like Shaq and Charles Barkley and some of the old guard now being mouthpieces in media is they get to tell you the truth about how things – there's like a statute of limitations. I don't know how many years have to pass. But individuals will talk about things that happened in their college days, that, it's a different athletic director now. It's a different university president now.
How many shoe boxes of cash they
coaches
got.
now, like Lendale White at USC was talking about, I moved into this apartment and there was randomly $150,000 in cash in a gym bag in the apartment. Like,
on accident, of course. No one left that there on purpose to pay Lendale White.
And, Charles Barkley and Shaq have very famously sat on set and just been like, yes, I got paid. They don't talk about particulars. They don't say who they got the money from. But
they might still be donors, so they can't do that.
They'll crack jokes about just like, I made more money when I was at Auburn than I made my first year in the NBA, stuff like that. And they chuckle about it and they gloss over it, so people are like, wait, what? What did he say? But I believe everything that they say. Do you, James?
Oh, I don't like how you're setting me up here.
James, do you believe them when they tell those stories?
I believe when they've told those particular stories, yes, I believe that.
Do you believe when Shaq went on a podcast this weekend and he said, David Stern asked me, do I want to play somewhere that's warm or somewhere that's cold? Do you believe that conversation happened?
That David Stern asked Shaq?
Yes.
Those questions? That's bait, OC. I'm not going to
walk
walk into that trap, okay?
Do you believe Shaq when he says, David Stern asked me, and again, the conversation
they're just having casual conversation,
Look,
OC. They're not.
Hey.
Come on now.
James, there are two ways you could interpret this question, right? It could be small talk between the commissioner of the NBA talking to a rising prospect who everyone knows is going to be number one and just being like, so you don't have any control over where you go. Would you rather end up somewhere warm or somewhere cold? Just like, James, do you like the mountains or do you like the beach?
Yeah, or
Would you rather end up in Denver or in L.A., James? Would you rather be in the mountains or the beach?
Yeah.
It could just be small talk.
or like anyone who grew up LDS and a boy in LDS religion can relate to this. And hey, where do you want to go on your mission? Somewhere warm, somewhere cold?
Do you want to go stateside or overseas?
Yeah.
No one says stateside.
Yeah, hardly anyone's. I have not heard anyone from Utah that says, you know what, that Boise, Idaho mission sounds awesome.
Is that a shot at Jan Jorgensen? Because that's where he went on his mission.
Is that where he
Don't
went?
you do that to my guy Jan, all right?
I apologize, Jan. I didn't mean anything about that.
You
The
wanna
Janimal,
play,
right?
Hold on. Do you want to play where it's cold or where it's hot?
Well, why would anyone say cold?
Some people like the cold, James.
I guess some people do. Oh, yeah, Julius Randle has said he has come around to the cold. I remember you saying that.
The 1992 draft lottery, the Orlando Magic had the number 2 odds to get the number 1 pick. Do you recall who had the number 1 odds for the number 1 pick?
I do not.
It was the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Oh.
Would you rather play somewhere cold, Minnesota, or somewhere hot, Orlando or Charlotte?
And Shaq said cold, and somehow he still went to Orlando.
Knock it
Isn't
off.
that strange?
James,
This totally fed your conspiracy theory mind, though, didn't
that's
it?
why
OC?
I brought it up, James, because Shaquille O'Neal fed the conspiracy theory. He
Yeah.
knows exactly what the narrative is. He knows that everyone in the NBA world right now is like, the Dallas Mavericks had a 1% chance, and they got the number 1 overall pick. Shaq, you were drafted number 1. Did anyone ever ask you where you wanted to play? Because that's part of the conspiracy theory, right? That maybe Cooper Flagg and family had a conversation with whomever you have that conversation with and said, I don't want to end up in Salt Lake.
Yeah, he said.
wanna-
He said, "I'd rather be much closer to my childhood home in Maine. So
Yeah.
send me to Dallas."
That's an easier flight. American Airlines is a hub in Dallas. I mean, James, there's a lot of layers to this onion, and I'm just asking you, do you believe Shaquille O'Neal when he says, David Stern asked me if I want to play somewhere hot or somewhere cold?
I mean, there's no way to corroborate whether he did or didn't. So I
It's
guess
a yes or no
I
question.
guess the guy I guess we have to believe the one person who said that conversation happened.
And by the way, there is, even for people on your side of the fence who are like, it's not conspiracy at all, there's an easy, like, David Stern oversaw a different era of NBA basketball.
Yeah, come on now. This is also what, 8 years into the lottery at that point versus now.
This is 1992.
40 years in.
The Orlando Magic are a brand new franchise at this point who might need a little bit of nudge.
Yeah.
Like, let's see if we can get this team some traction. Let's see if we can get them a good player or two. And let's see if they can take off.
Let's send the guy who breaks backboards on a regular basis over there. That'll get some attention to Orlando.
Where there's smoke, sometimes there is fire. Where there's smoke, sometimes there's just a bunch of smoke, James.
I
But
mean,
I
everyone
wanted to-
knows David Stern was fixing games, so this isn't.
For your
Just
consideration,
kidding.
James, I just wanted to throw that out there in the hot lunch today, all right? Food for thought. Just food for thought.
I hate that you did that, OC.
Yeah.
I hate it. But
Yeah.
we're going to have Sarah Todd on at 1:30, and she's going to tell you everything's on the up and up.
And I'm not going to believe her, but that's just the way things work in the United States of America right now. Okay, that's the hot lunch. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with Scott Mitchell. ESPN, it is list season, people. ESPN ranked the quarterback rooms of all Division I football teams. They didn't put them 1 through 132. They put them into tiers, okay? Tier 1 is you got a great quarterback room. Just wait until you hear which tier the Utah football team is in. We'll see what Scott thinks of it on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Reminder, the Festival of Tea is still going on. We're giving away golf every day, all day, every show. Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell, right here on the Sean O'Connell Show, and on the Drive with Spence Checketts. We have 18 holes to El Monte today. We'll give that away during Topical Trivia in like an hour and a half. Scott Mitchell had a great show this morning, and he's kind enough to jump on and talk some football with me. Scott, welcome. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Always good to talk to you, Sean.
So I don't know if you dove into I didn't listen to all 60 minutes of the Scott Mitchell show today. By the way, great stuff about your grandpa. I was laughing and almost crying in one conversation there. So it was really, really good. Did you see the list that ESPN put out ranking the quarterback rooms and putting them all into different tiers?
I did not.
Okay.
Ranking where? In the NFL?
In college football. ESPN's writers went through and they put all Division I teams into different quarterback tiers. And so they did. Here's an example. Top of the class. All right, Tier 1, top of the class. They've got Clemson, LSU, Oklahoma, Penn State, and South Carolina. That's their top tier. You scroll all the way down, all the way down to tier number 9, and that's where they have Utah's quarterback room tiered out.
Ouch.
They characterize that one as welcome to the big leagues. It's a bunch of quarterbacks who are trying to prove that they can go from either one AA school to a Division I school, or from a Group of 5 school to a Power 5 school, and of course that's where Devin Dampier sits. And Gio Lopez, for example, who is going to the presumed starter for North Carolina, will be Bill Belichick's starter. He's got North Carolina in this tier: Tennessee, Utah, Iowa, and Colorado. Now, they do this in a clever way, Scott, to make it seem like, well, these are just a certain category, but we think this is the 9th best category or whatever. And I boil it down to, like, if this is the 9th best version of a quarterback room in college football, what does that mean for wins and losses for this Utah football team in the 2025 season? I have high expectations of Devin Dampier. What I've seen from him on film, I think, will translate to the Power 4 level. I want to know your thoughts, because you are a guy who played the position at the highest level, and you get to look at it through a different lens. You know a lot more about quarterback play than I do.
I wouldn't be too sure about that, Sean. It's not as complicated.
I was a little league quarterback in 8th grade, Scott. So maybe we're on the same level.
So this is the best instruction. When I went to the Detroit Lions, Wayne Fond says, "Hey, Herman Moore can catch the ball, throw it to him, and Barry can run it, hand it to him." That's all the instruction I ever got. Right? You can't go wrong with that.
Perfect.
And Dan Marino used to say, "Hey, just pick a guy and let it fly," and that's all you have to do. And because no one can beat a perfect throw. If you can make a perfect throw, it's indefensible. And so those are the 4 things I know, and they serve me well. But the interesting thing about Devin Dampier, it feels like the NIL and maybe Group of 5 teams are becoming the new junior college. In fact, the junior college route might even be a better recruiting ground if you're able to maintain eligibility. You can go play and not lose your eligibility. But look at Cam Ward, who is the Heisman Trophy winner. He's the guy that's the first pick in the draft. He started out at Incarnate Word, ended up at Washington State, and then Miami. And every place he evolved, he got better, he improved. A lot of where I think some of these quarterbacks have success is that they get to play. Now with Devin, it's even more interesting in that not only is he moving up, but he's moving up with his coach, and having that familiarity. That was probably the one word, the one comment I think every coach at Utah said. He really helped a lot of people. It really helped us implement and progress further as a team in spring, because Devin Dampier knew the offense. And what I've seen from him, and again, you kind of reserve a little bit of it, but because it is spring but what I have seen is he's multifaceted, and he really is a dual threat quarterback, far more than Cam Rising was. Cam was a thrower who ran like a crazy man, and Devin Dampier is the guy who actually knows. He's a better runner in that he can protect himself and he can be elusive, even as he's being tackled. And there's a lot to be said for that. Where Cam could kind of get himself in awkward positions because he was kind of running out of control sometimes, and of course that's when a lot of injuries happen. So there'll be a lot of production offensively from Devin. I don't know that it'll all be throwing, but it will certainly be both of those things. And there's been a lot of I guess experience or examples of guys that have moved up and done well. There also have been guys that haven't. Last year at Baylor, I forget who. He was the MAC Player of the Year. Started at quarterback and just wasn't ready for big time football, and so it kind of cuts both ways. I kind of have a hard time with these quarterback room. It's like, look at the first guy, right? I mean, because that's really what matters. That's the guy who's really going to get you places, and we've kind of seen that at Utah in the past couple of years. And so quarterback rooms are a little bit of a misnomer, and I think downgrade situations, unless you're like Texas, who had Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers a year ago. That's quarterbacks just don't want to sit. They don't want to see if they're any good. They don't want to sit behind someone else, and they're going to move. Isaac Wilson could be that exception. We don't know who he'll be. He certainly got a baptism by fire a year ago, and maybe kind of taking a reset, setting back, and observing a little bit might be a good chance for him to grow. And then the next time he does get to play, I'm sure he'll be better than he was before.
You already kind of answered what was going to be my second question. Is they are ranking quarterback rooms and not just starting quarterbacks here. And like I said, you partially answered this, but especially with the lens that we have to look through from a Utah perspective, these other guys in the room, the Isaac Wilsons and the Zerbrugs and some of those guys, you don't want them to be a factor for your team. You want the starter to play every single down, but that hasn't been the reality for Utah football in the most recent history. So how much do you look at those guys when you're evaluating, like, hey, is this position group okay? Because I look at linebacker depth, I look at offensive line depth. Quarterback depth is a completely different animal.
Yeah, what's harder with a quarterback is the one guy has to hog all the reps, and you just do. And it's not a bad thing or an ego thing. It's a necessity thing. You have to try to get as many looks as you possibly can with all the different plays that you're going to run. You can have one play, and you can have 6 or 7 defenses run against it and have a different result. And that's just one play. And if you go through all of the plays, you just need to see those looks as much as you possibly can get. What do you handle if they're in a 2-deep zone or a single high safety, or what if they blitz you, or what if they're in the fronts, overs, unders, odds, evens. There's just all kinds of different scenarios, and the more you get comfortable with a play and the more plays you get comfortable with, the better off you're going to be. So you just need all those reps. And, with linebackers and, they rotate those guys in, and defensive linemen. I mean, Utah's even rotated its offensive line at certain positions before. In games, you get rotation with the wide receivers with really most positions, maybe not corner. I mean, you're going to bring in a corner. This year, Utah is going to rotate corners a little bit, and Smith Snowden's going to be on the outside, but then he's also going to be on the inside, and so they get a feel for the game, they get experience. Whereas quarterbacks, you kind of have to wait your turn if you're the backup, and by waiting, you're inexperienced, and then you have growing pains when you finally get in there, and so it's really hard to know. It's really hard to develop multiple guys. It just is at quarterback. The best way to develop them is to keep guys in your program and develop them through the guy ahead of them. And I think Brian Johnson, when he played at Utah, had a tremendous benefit of watching Alex Smith for a few years. And I think it really, really helped a lot in that in his development and in the transition from one guy to the next. Throwing a guy in kind of too early is usually not a good thing initially. I mean, Tyler Huntley played and probably played a year earlier than maybe everyone thought, and he beat out Troy Williams, who had won 9 games the year before, and Utah just felt like they were better with Tyler, and they were going to take the lumps with him being younger, and it panned out. It got him to the Pac-12 championship a couple of years. So it's hard. And, the Bert Ficklin is the guy that, that's the really unknown at the quarterback position at Utah, because he showed, I think, to a lot of people, a lot of promise, and maybe he caught more attention with the reps that he got this spring than probably anybody, maybe anyone on the team, quite frankly.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked with Kyle Whittingham about that a lot in his media availability, and he would just be honest and say, look, we're giving reps to 3 guys right now, and one of those 3 was Bird Ficklin. That doesn't happen if he isn't making the most of those reps. They're not going to waste time at these practices, and so the fact that a true freshman coming in was given that and then continued throughout spring camp to receive reps, I think is really promising for him. And it was 3 guys, and then we saw a 4th guy in the spring game, and Zerbrug looked good in the spring game. So, yeah, the quarterback room thing versus the individual quarterback thing is always a tough thing to gauge. But like you said, the 2 deep is a lot different, and the 3 deep at quarterback is a lot different. And knock on wood, we hope that it's mostly just the 1 deep for the Utes this year. I wanted to ask you about Brock Purdy and his contract. This is a guy who was, Mr. Irrelevant. He was an afterthought as a quarterback, and he played his way into being a starter on a Super Bowl team. Obviously not a Super Bowl winning team, but on a Super Bowl team. And he was doing that. I think his career earnings up to this point were $2.6 million or something, and he's going to now make more than that per week on his new contract. But, of course, it changes the way that the team around you gets constructed when you are gobbling up 20% of the salary cap. So what did you think of the Brock Purdy contract, 5 years, $265 million for the man from Iowa State?
It's tough because he starts out as Mr. Irrelevant, goes to a Super Bowl, goes to a conference championship game, and he's a nobody before that. And he's paid like that. And then you have a lot of people like Kyler Murray, you have Tua Tagovailoa, you have Trevor Lawrence, who were high draft choices, number 1 pick kind of guys, and they've gotten a whole lot more money than Brock Purdy. And ask yourself, who's had a more productive career than any of those? You would say Brock Purdy. He's not a speculation type of player. He's proven that he can get to a Super Bowl. Now, anyone who goes to Super Bowl has to have players around him. And so this is a deal that I think is really good for Brock Purdy. It might still have some value for the 49ers, but you always – the 49ers have been in a position where they haven't had a quarterback, and it's got them nowhere. So they have to at least have that position. You have to find a guy and ride that horse. And so they may have some tough decisions. They may have to figure hopefully they do well in the draft, and hopefully they retain the right chemistry on their team to still be competitive, because if you're a good team, you're going to have to balance that salary cap situation. And I think people saw what happened with Philadelphia and how they drafted really well, and they had young players come in and step up, and they won a Super Bowl with it. But they paid their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, a year or so ago. And the quarterbacks, I actually brought this up today, quarterbacks are you just can't find that many, like really good ones. I mean, there's a lot. There's like 10 really quality quarterbacks in the NFL, and beyond 10, it's hard to find someone who's really good. And yet you can find a lot of good offensive linemen. You can find a lot of good defensive linemen. You can find a lot of corners, and in pretty much every position you can always find and it's because the quarterback position is not a great athlete necessarily. Like being a great athlete does not make you a great quarterback, and the makeup of a great quarterback is a mystery to anyone. And really, it's being able to process information quickly and consistently into action. Where you see it and you throw it, and you throw it consistently, and you have that ability to do that. And it has nothing to do with athleticism. It's more of a mental thing, and so for whatever reason, it's not developed like it is other positions. And so when you find a quarterback that's really good, that has value, you're gonna pay that quarterback, regardless of if he was Mr. Relevant before or if it maybe has an impeding value or impact on your football team.
How does it change that locker room chemistry, the internal pressure for yourself, maybe when you do get paid? Like when you have the bigger contract than you came in with as a rookie, or when you're getting paid like a starting quarterback. The math is different. Your relationship, I imagine, with the rest of the team might change a little bit because everyone knows, even though it's a business and everyone wants everyone to get paid. Like when you're getting bargain price Brock Purdy, if he throws a pick, and you're the starting left tackle who makes 10, 20 times as much as he does, you're probably not as judgmental. Does it change your relationship with your teammates when you get this kind of money?
It inevitably does. I mean, it's not, how severe that is, it's just really the people that you're around. It's kind of their perspective on things, but there are always going to be guys that feel like they should get paid more. There's always going to be guys that are petty and jealous. There's always going to be guys that are like, man, I couldn't be happier for the guy. And if you have a good strong team and a good chemistry, this isn't an issue. It's I think everyone understands the business of football. And one thing that's different from when I played, even the guys that aren't getting paid are getting paid. The money is so good for all of these players. I mean, a rookie minimum salary, I think, is either at $1 million or close to it. And that's the minimum. That is the absolute lowest you're going to get paid in your career. And, for Mr. Irrelevant even to get paid $2.6 million like he has today, it may not seem like a lot, but it would, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in previous years. And I think money more in the NFL is more like, how are you investing your money? Do you have a good money manager? Do you have any stock tips for me? Do you have, how do I reduce my tax basis? There's all kinds of, these guys are talking, they're having intelligent conversations about money management today, as opposed to, so it is an issue, but I don't know that it's as big of an issue. Now, the perception will 1,000% be different for Brock Purdy. When you're the backup, you can do no wrong. When you're Mr. Irrelevant, you can absolutely do no wrong. Now people are going to start nitpicking, and like me, it's like, Brock Purdy throws the ball over the middle of the field. He doesn't really throw on the boundaries. He doesn't really throw the ball deep very often. He stays kind of within a certain area, a certain throw, a certain distance, a certain depth. And people are going to tune into that and catch up to that. And can he adjust? Can he make different throws? And that they're going to force him to make, and do it consistently? And that's where you have 16, 17-year careers, when you can make that kind of evolution. And only time will tell, where it ends up for him. But man, I'm always a person I'm so grateful for when someone, gets paid in the NFL. It's, a life-changing experience for him. It's tremendous.
I hope that my contract extension with ESPN ends up paying me weekly what my annual salary was, because that would change the math a little bit. That'd be pretty cool.
That's the going rate, Sean. That's the way things should be. So, I'm all in support of pay raises.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's $55 million a year is the average yearly value on this contract, and it doesn't make him the highest paid quarterback in the game, which a lot of people thought is what he and his agent were going for. But they had to make a decision, and that's I'm a big time Niner fan. So I'll ride with it. We'll see how it plays out. But wow.
Well, and they got him sure cheap for 4 or 5 years, so it kind of it's at the end of the day they haven't paid him crazy amounts of money, so it all works out. He'll do fine.
Scott, you're the man. Appreciate your time.
You got it. All right, be good.
Scott Mitchell, our resident Utah football insider, Utah football legend, color analyst on the Utah football broadcast, host of the Down and Dirty show right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, which, of course, happens right before the Sean O'Connell show. One of college football's great rivalry games is in serious jeopardy of ending this year. I'll tell you what game I'm talking about on Utah's number one sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
Here's Wallace, goes at Jokic. Oh, he throws it down. A thunderous dunk from Cason Wallace, and the crowd erupts again.
All of you who are hoping for a close one in Game 7 didn't get it. Cason Wallace with a poster dunk over one of the game's best, maybe the game's very best in Joker. OKC smashed the Nuggets. That sound courtesy of ESPN. Mike Breen on the call. Thunder versus T-Wolves in the Western Conference Final. Game 1 tomorrow night. You can hear it right here on ESPN 700. And on our brother station, 103.9, 98.3, The Fan. Part of our ESPN radio network. All right. Sean O'Connell Show continuing here. And James, you know how much this bothers me when college football rivalries are not properly respected.
Absolutely. As you should be bothered.
You are a big fan of certain rivalries, especially in college football. You love Ohio State, Michigan, because you're somehow a strange Buckeye fan.
Mm-hmm.
Take that one out. Give me your other favorite college football rivalry games.
Well, I mean, I love the Iron Bowl.
Okay.
That might be of the national rivalries. That might be my
Alabama,
second favorite.
Auburn. Okay.
Yeah, Alabama, Auburn. But I mean, being from Utah, even though I didn't choose to root for, and my family wasn't either. No one in my family was particularly a big Utah or BYU fan. My immediate family, anyway. Like you have to have an affinity for the Holy War growing up here. I mean, even I would venture to guess, even like diehard Utah State fans tune into that, like with some.
You have to.
Like growing up here. So
there's always something to talk about from the game, even if it's not your favorite result, as it wasn't for the Utah fans last year with the penalty. But there's always a reason to tune into that game. Always ends up like 99% of the time it's an awesome game.
Yeah. So yeah, I have to say that's a top 2 or 3 rivalry for me. Of course, behind the game, the Ohio State, Michigan.
Yes.
For me.
Safe to say that most people in the college football world, even if they don't list it among their favorites, would acknowledge that USC Notre Dame is one of the most important rivalry games in the land.
Also a great one. Yeah.
USC's trying to kill it.
What?
Right now, there is one game left, contractually signed, on the USC versus Notre Dame series. Now, they have played this game. USC Notre Dame has played 95 times. They missed 3 years during World War II. Big things were happening, all right? Both teams were not able to field competitive squads.
Yes, there was something called the draft, and we're not talking about NBA or NHL, NFL here.
There were
about drafting kids into the military.
You also were not able to travel cross country because of rationing of fuel and things like that for the war efforts. So they missed those 3 years, and they missed the COVID year. Aside from that, this is college football. This is a game that happens every year in college football, and October 18th is when it's scheduled this year. That's the last one that's been signed.
Wait, that's an October 18th game?
Let me make sure.
That's
check.
one typically in November.
You're right, but
they moved it to October this year. Because we have that grievance against the Big 12 putting Utah BYU on that same date, not realizing what they have.
Yeah, October 18th in South Bend, the last one on the current contract right now.
That I don't like that they moved that from November too. So what's going on there?
Right now, the Notre Dame Athletic Department, again, a football independent that is contractually obligated to play 6 games per year against ACC opponents. So they're like kind of half in the ACC as a football program. They've also signed a 12-year rivalry deal with Clemson. By the way, doesn't count towards the 6 games they have to play against the ACC. So now that's 7 games on your schedule.
Didn't realize that was not one of the 6. Wow.
Not one of the 6.
That's
one of the
big-time matchup, though.
One of the contingencies of that. So Notre Dame playing Clemson, playing 6 ACC games. They play Michigan as often as they can, right? This is a school that doesn't shy away from the tough matchups. Notre Dame wants to extend this in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Pete Bavacqua, the athletic director, had said that they're seeking a long-term extension to the rivalry, and correctly stated that I think Southern Cal and Notre Dame should play every year for as long as college football is played. And SC knows how we feel. SC, Southern California, USC, the program, the university that killed the Pac-12, they have offered a 1-year extension to the rivalry. They said, yeah, we'll play next year in L.A. Let's do it.
One more home game. We'll take that.
Notre Dame is like, we want an extension, a long-term extension. We know that they're willing to sign 12-year extensions of rivalries like they just did with Clemson. And USC says, yeah, we'll do one. We'll do one more.
And we also want an extension. Yeah, same page.
USC is the reason why college football can't have nice things sometimes.
Absolutely.
I cannot look. It's fine if there's conference realignment and it doesn't make economic sense for like the Oregon State-Oregon game to continue. That's fine. I don't actually feel like it's fine, but I will accept the reasoning behind making a game like that not be played every year, which, by the way, officials at those two schools are doing their best to keep the Civil War game going. They're doing their best to keep the Apple Cup going between Washington and Washington State. Even though those things, they don't draw national eyes. They're not huge television ratings games necessarily. Like, I don't know, USC Notre Dame is. If the almighty dollar is what's guiding everything in college football, which it is, this game is a big ticket game. This game is a big revenue game. This is a big television. I want this on my TV, and I want this on my slate if I'm a television executive type game. You have to make this game happen every single year, and USC is being punks about it.
I mean, but don't worry, OC. They still want to play USC UCLA every year. Don't worry, that rivalry is staying.
Why are you saying that to me? They just dragged their little brother in football, UCLA, along to the Big Ten, and we're like, yeah, come on, come to, you're going to make $75 million per year in this conference. You're never going to win.
Protect our rivalry. We're all about protecting rivalries, so come on with us, UCLA.
You're never going to win a conference championship in the Big Ten, ever. No. It's never going to happen for UCLA football, ever. They couldn't do it in the Pac-12. They're not going to do it in the Big Ten.
By the way, USC's most years isn't going to either.
USC.
They have a much better shot at doing that because they have the football tradition and they have lots of money and all that. But we saw how that went in the Pac-12 in the 12 years Utah was in there. Did USC win every year with all of that going for them at that time? No. They have way more competition in the Big Ten and than they did in the Pac-12. There's no they might win once out of every 5 years at the most, OC.
This game has been played every active year of Notre Dame and USC football in the last century, effectively. They've met 95 times since 1924. Missed 3 during World War II, once during COVID, and, of course, 2025, they have not yet played.
And like you said, that is not the Civil War, Oregon State, Apple Cup, Washington State, even BYU, Utah, that's more relevant to the regional markets, right?
This is not a regional rivalry.
This is one of the national rivalries. This is up there with the game, Ohio State, Michigan, Iron Bowl, Alabama, Auburn. It's right up there with those. It might even be ahead of those in a lot of people's minds.
This is more of a national rivalry. There's no, those games you're just talking about, those are regional games that have been adopted by the college football world as important, right? Kind of like the Red River shootout.
Right, Red River is another one, yeah.
Right? Those are they're regional, they're conference games. This one is something that Ara Parseghian was just like, I want to go to L.A. Let's do this thing. And it's created a cultural phenomenon, and USC is like, maybe we'll extend it 1 year at a time. Cannot stand that thought process.
Terrible.
Terrible. If it were Friday, I would just be making this a grievance.
Absolutely.
I might still bring it up again on Friday as a grievance. Come on, USC.
Little teaser grievance for you on a Monday.
By the way, Cody Worsham is the associate athletic director at USC who responded for comment to the story because, of course, they don't even get a comment from the real athletic director. We want the USC-Notre Dame rivalry to continue, which is why we offered an extension to our agreement. Everybody knows Cody, which is not a serious adult name. Everybody knows, Cody, that a 1-year extension of the deal is not the same thing as being committed to keeping this rivalry intact for the foreseeable future.
No one say anything because OC's hot and bothered enough that you're gonna catch strays, even if you're just for your name.
So my apologies to all Codys out there. Okay, I'm just mad at this particular Cody Worsham.
Seriously, this is terrible. And to say, well, technically 1 year is an extension is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous response.
It's like, yeah, I did. I definitely. We want the same things here. We offered you an extension. It's like the 49ers when they first offered Brock Purdy. Well, of course we want you. We want to pay you $40 million a year. He's like, that's below the market rate for a starting quarterback. I've taken you to the Super Bowl.
3 straight NFC Championship games too.
Like, yeah, we want you. We want to extend you.
That's why we offered you a contract,
we offered you
Brock.
A contract, Brock. Brock, did you not see? Did you not get the email? I'll send it again.
It says official contract offer.
You have to opt in for DocuSign, okay? You have to read the terms and conditions, all right? You can use your mouse pad to do the signature, or you can just choose a font. He's like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
I know what a contract extension is.
If you're Notre Dame, you're
this
just
is a disrespectful one.
Like, guys, we offered you yes, we don't want 1 year. We want it to be 12 years. We just did 12 years with Clemson. They are far less important to us and to the national college football
absolutely.
world.
The Clemson Notre Dame games over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years have been outstanding because Clemson's been awesome in that time, and Notre Dame has stayed up to their standard. Not quite as high as the level of play as Clemson has been in some of those years, but still really good. So that's been awesome, but that's not that's a recent rivalry because both teams played a lot and they're both really good. Like you said, USC Notre Dame have been rivals for a century, and they're willing to just be like, not that important to us. We got bigger fish to fry in the Big Ten. It's weird, OC, and it should be unacceptable to the power brokers of college football. Hopefully, NBC and some of these other networks, Fox and the Big Ten, are saying, no, USC, you cannot kill a top 3 rivalry in all of college football. You can't do that.
Texter 7580 says SC is trying to force Notre Dame's hand to join the Big Ten. Notre Dame is the real reason, not SC. Think bigger, and shout out to 7580 because thinking bigger did the B1 right, like Big Ten.
Yeah, and the one of the G's capitalized.
Screwed up there,
okay.
but tried. Got halfway.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll allow it.
I understand.
We'll overlook
what you meant.
No, that is clever by our texter there. Shout out to them. That's a pretty good conspiracy theory, though.
Oh, James rejects all conspiracy theories. I am. By the way, this one for me, I like the idea of Notre Dame joining the Big Ten.
I do too. They obviously fit regionally. They always have, and they've got rivalries. They've got a pretty good rivalry with Michigan over the years. Ohio State Notre Dame has been a decent rivalry over the years. Yeah.
Here's what I don't want to see, though. If you join the Big Ten, this new Clemson deal that we just announced, that's going to get scrapped. Because Notre Dame's going to be like, I don't want to play a Big Ten slate and play Clemson every year, which is probably what USC is doing right now. I don't want to play a Big Ten slate and Notre Dame every year. We're trying to win national championships. Guess what, Trojans? It's not going to happen. Anyway, I referenced this list of quarterback rooms being ranked based on their tiers, right? ESPN put Utah's quarterback room in their 9th ranked tier. Tier number 9 out of, I think, a total 14. It was an important exercise, though, if you're looking at where they have Utah's quarterback room ranked, to look at, well, what about the other Big 12 teams? Utah fans, we're going to discuss where Utah is ranked as a quarterback room relative to the other Big 12 teams. That is the real judgment point for me. We'll get to that in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Live Night Events presents the 2025 Granary Live Concert Series, powered by Nightingale College and Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer. Experience outdoor concerts in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City's Granary District. Find out the details at ESPN700sports.com. Craig Bolerjack's going to join us at the top of hour number 3. Sarah Todd also stopping by at 1:30. And then we'll give away some golf with topical trivia before we get out of here. All right, I referenced this when we were talking with Scott Mitchell. ESPN has a list out. They're putting out lists basically every day now. Great spring/summer content. They took the Division I quarterback rooms and ranked them in tiers. Not like sadness tiers like on a wedding cake.
Oh, so they were crying while they ranked these, OC?
Well, they might
how
have been.
strange.
They ranked them while they were in tiers as writers. No.
T-I-R-E-S.
T-I-E-R-S. Not tires, tiers. T-I-E-R-S. Okay? They threw a bunch of facts in here. It's a long read, but it's worth going through. Utah's quarterback room comes in at number 9, as I referenced with Scott, alongside Colorado, Iowa, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah. The theme of these is welcome to the big leagues, guys that are taking a step up from a lower division or a group of 5 school to a Power 4 school. That's what Tier 9 looks like, all right? Mark Gronowski's coming from a powerhouse program in 1AA to Iowa. Caden Salter's moving up to Colorado. Gio Lopez is the South Alabama kid that's going to be coached by Bill Belichick. I wonder how many Tom Brady phone calls that kid's going to get. That's going to be fascinating. And Devin Dampier, of course, fits this mold. But as I was looking at it and I was going through it kind of a second time, I was like, okay, so Devin Dampier is supposed to be your starter. Bird Ficklin, Nate Johnson, I don't really think belongs in the quarterback picture. I think he's just going to be kind of like a utility player.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They didn't hear his spring football post-practice interview with us where he said Swiss Army knife about 10 times.
Isaac Wilson, obviously. They've got Brendan Zerbrug listed instead of Bird Ficklin. Bird is the one who's going to get more reps or got more reps in the spring. I think we'll get more reps.
Zerbrug, I believe, not like maybe 0 practice reps. He did get in the spring game.
Yeah,
though.
he scored a touchdown in the spring game, right?
So he's the bigger name because he's transferred from Oklahoma, but at least by spring practice standards, Utah football seems to believe more in Bird Ficklin.
So where do the other Big 12 teams fall on the tiers?
Yeah, besides Colorado.
Colorado's there alongside Utah. Tier 8B, there's no Big 12 teams. Tier 8A, fresh starts, veteran edition. Houston is there with Connor Wegman and Zion Chris in their quarterback room. In Tier 7, that's where you find Cincinnati and BYU. Interestingly enough, BYU's quarterbacks listed here are Jake Retzloff and Bear Bachmeier, who's a very recent addition, the young brother of Tiger Bachmeier, right? So the tagline on this one is consistently consistent. I think Jake Retzloff is being put in a perfect situation right now where a lot of these national publications, and we'll see how it plays out at Big 12 Media Days, but I think there's a lot of people looking at him as just kind of like, and that's going to be motivating for Jake Retzloff. So Tier 6, that was Tier 7. Tier 6, you've got Kansas State, Avery Johnson, and Jacob Newth. There are 10 Big 12 schools and, of course, 10 quarterback rooms listed above where Utah's at with Devin Dampier. 10 in the Big 12 conference. If Utah's quarterback room, and, of course, we're mostly talking about Devin Dampier, is the 11th best in the Big 12, this is going to be a very frustrating year for Utah fans. I think that this is a criminal underration. Is that a word?
I love it. I don't. If it's not a word, it is now. Underration.
Underration.
I think underration.
I think that this is. I think Retzloff's being overlooked on Tier 7, and I think Devin Dampier is being overlooked even more so on Tier 9. And that's fine because you got to organize this somehow. You got to put it. You got to find ways based on the data available to you to categorize these guys. And these writers at ESPN, David Hale did this one. He put a lot of work into it. But I think that both Utah's quarterback room and BYU's quarterback room are going to outperform the expectations here relative to the rest of the country, because when you get down into tier 7, that means you're in like the bottom half of quarterbacks nationally and quarterback rooms nationally. When you get into 9, you're even further down that list. That means they've listed like 60 schools, more than that. They've listed 80 schools above you in tier 9.
Yeah, I don't see that for either Utah or BYU. Because Devin Dampier is a lot more talented, has a lot more upside than Jake Retzloff. Even though Jake performed really well last year, 11-win team for BYU with him as the starting quarterback, cannot discount that and the experience that brings. I think that Devin Dampier is and Utah's quarterback room is more underrated in this list than BYU's. But both of them, there's not 60, 80 schools with a better quarterback situation than Utah and BYU. And I understand, I don't have a problem with Utah being grouped in the welcome to the big leagues group, because Devin Dampier technically fits that label as a guy who played really well at Group of 5, but now he's playing in Power 4, and we don't know how well he's going to do. But he's not a guy who came up from 1AA. He's not a guy from South Alabama, which is technically the same level as New Mexico, but we all know the Mountain West has been a much better conference than the Sun Belt over the years. I believe South Alabama's Sun Belt, right? Like, it is a criminal underration.
Yes.
Underration for Utah and BYU.
We're sticking with that as an actual term in the English language. Before we take a break and we come back with Bowler, this list did provide a couple of fun facts you could take to the water cooler if those still exist in people's offices. So no quarterback was more elusive under pressure last year than Devin Dampier. I've talked about this being an important thing.
Yeah, welcome to the big leagues. Pass rushers playing against Utah.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not even close. He was sacked once for every 25 dropbacks under pressure, okay? He was sacked 4 times.
So the opposite of Shedeur Sanders is what you're saying.
Yes. So 25 dropbacks, one sack per 25 dropbacks under pressure. So that means he was under pressure 100 different times, sacked 4 times, okay? That puts him 8 dropbacks per sack above the next best player against pressure. That's an analytic that matters for Utah football. Another fun fact, last year, quarterbacks, there were 1,000-yard quarterbacks when you took out sack yardage, okay? The quarterbacks who accounted for 1,000 non-sack rush yards last year and are back for 2025 are Devin Dampier with 1,187, John Mateer, Parker Navarro, and the Horvath kid. So 4 quarterbacks were 1,000-yard rushers last year and are back for 2025. 4. And Devin Dampier is one of them. And the second most productive of the 4, by the way.
Yeah, we don't know till we see some real games, OC. I just don't think that there's 80 quarterbacks better than Devin Dampier in the nation. And I haven't looked at every college's quarterback room. To be fair, ESPN did, but I don't believe that.
All right, we got to take a quick one here. We're going to come back, talk some NBA playoffs and Utah Jazz with Craig Bolerjack. That's in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome into hour number 3. Show today and every day is brought to you by Les Schwab Tires, wheels, accessories, air fresheners, all of it for whatever it is you're driving. Stop by your local Les Schwab. Plenty of locations up and down the Wasatch Front. Tell them OC sent you. Pros there are going to get the job done right the first time. We've got some basketball to talk. Sarah Todd's going to join us in 20 minutes or so. We're efforting Craig Bolerjack right now. I asked the question at the start of the show whether or not you feel as a Jazz fan, as a Jazz follower, that this year's field of 3 teams who have never won an NBA championship in conference finals, plus the Knicks, who haven't won a championship since 1973, whether it gives you more belief that the Utah Jazz can do it. If these teams can get here to this point, if 3 out of 4 chance we have a brand new first-time ever NBA champion, can the Jazz do it? Does it give you more hope as a Jazz fan? Let me know what you think, 877-353-0700. We'll ask the same thing of my next guest, Craig Bolerjack, who, of course, you'll find as the voice of the Utah Jazz. Bowler, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, see, I'm good. How you been?
Doing all right, man. Glad to have you on and catch up with you a little bit. When you look at these Eastern and Western Conference Finals, as you're well aware, 3 of the 4 teams, 3 of the 4 franchises have never won an NBA championship. To me, I look at that, it provides me a little glimmer as a Jazz follower, as a Jazz fan. Like, all right, well, if Minnesota can get this far, we certainly can get back here. If the Pacers, who've been close but no cigar, if they can make it happen this year, maybe this Jazz franchise isn't as far away as it feels right now. Does seeing it happen on your television for other teams give you any boost as a Jazz fan?
You know, for sure. The networks may not like the fact it's New York versus OKC or Minnesota, right? Just because of the market sizes. But I'd say it's been great basketball. I mean, it's been physical. There's been, huge comebacks, big shots. OKC dominated Game 7 after a quick start by Denver. But, what it does is it kind of turns the league back upside down where teams that have that window that every GM and Justin and Danny included, is it 3 years? Is it 4? The Jazz want a longer window of opportunity. Golden State's probably been the team, OC, that's had that long 10-year run of potential championships without really kind of, piecing it all together. Well, they did bring up, Kevin Durant out of OKC, but I think there is hope. I mean, it doesn't feel that way right now because the Jazz are still a bit reeling. Jazz fans are reeling from not getting the 1 pick, the 3 pick. They actually dropped to 5. So what do they do? What do they do with that pick? What does Danny do with the plethora of draft picks he has in his pocket? Important summer. Seems like we always say it is, but this one's even more so. And the league's aging. I think you're kind of seeing Denver making that turnout, Golden State, Phoenix, even Boston with the injury. That window, how tight is it? That's kind of the interesting thing to see what the Celtics will do in the short term. But, yeah, this is kind of fresh. I mean, is it sexy? Maybe not, but that's okay because I think the NBA needs – to show that mid-sized markets have the ability to impact this league just like anyone else. They've done it through, trades, Siakam. They did it through, drafts, obviously. New York's been everywhere. What is this, the first Eastern Conference championship that they've played, and they do it against Indiana since 2020? I mean, that's a long wait. And Jazz fans haven't been there since, they haven't been to the finals since '98. But Boozer and D. Will got under the
Western Conference Final,
the Western Conference Finals. But yeah, it's an interesting road, man. Teams take, and OKC's probably done it the right way for a smaller mid-level team, where they did get the big draw in SGA, but they were able to build, and this window is just kind of opening for them. Still very young, but what OC, what I've seen is a lot of depth with the Thunder, a lot more depth than people may think with Indiana. Didn't see a lot of depth with Denver. or the Lakers, and that's really where it is. You can spend all the money you want on 3 to 4, high-level, all-stars and Hall of Famers to be, but you got to have that depth, and I thought it really showed in the Denver series against OKC.
The Minnesota team that obviously has Rudy Gobert on it, and Ant-Man is one of the most exciting players to watch. He's still got some raw tendencies, which I think it makes it a little bit more exciting to watch. Like,
right,
he'll give you 40 points in a game, but also like 9 turnovers. You're like, man, that guy, he plays with a little bit of fire. Are you surprised that the trade as of now has worked out so well for Minnesota? Because I remember, here in Salt Lake City, a lot of us were like, are you serious? The Jazz got that haul back for Rudy Gobert? And yet, right now it looks like a pretty darn good trade for Minnesota.
Yeah. Conley continues just to do what he has to do. Nothing fancy, OC. Gobert's had those moments, too, where he's had 2020s. That's an interesting story. If they get into the Western Conference championship and actually into the NBA Finals, I mean, it's going to be really, I think, one hell of a story for the NBA. They got depth, too, and they do have Ant-Man, who many believe, if he can settle down a bit, could be the next face of the NBA, whether he wants it or not. But, man, the guy's athletic. I mean, he's fun to watch. And, they're well coached, and there's really nothing except for Anthony Edwards outside that is all that, quote, sexy. But they play hard. And you know what? Teams that play D and cause just absolute constant disruption, which is what OKC does. And I thought OKC this year, OC was the best team defensively that I saw. But, it's going to be interesting. I think it does give hope. The Jazz, how far outside the window are they? I mean, you can be a pessimist and say a long way, or say, look, there's some talent, a few pieces here, a few pieces there. Just depends what Danny, Justin, and Ryan, how quick they want to, kind of, after not getting the number 1 pick, does that rev them back into a mode of let's go. Let's get back and be competitive. Let's play these young guys. If we're a play-in team, so be it. But again, we're going to find that out in the next 4 to 5 weeks on what direction they want to go, and what vets stay, what vets go, because there's still some talent out there. I mean, John Collins, never really got the props, but the guy plays his backside off, and he's improved himself with the Jazz in the 2 years. JC, twilight of the career, but still just has a little magical moments. But does he interrupt the development of the younger players? And those are all things that we'll be talking about behind closed doors. And, what do you do? Do you give Walker Kessler the green light? Do you let Lowry stay? Do you move him? Does he fit the time frame? OC, I think that's the most intriguing part. But if they decide to move forward quickly, then obviously Markkanen may play a piece. If not, then he most likely won't. So those are the things I'm waiting for. The lottery's come and gone. Disappointed, yes, but you know what? You got to move on. And the rest of the league is doing the same thing. And I'm just having fun watching these playoffs. They were better. They're better than I thought they would be, and a lot of surprises along the way.
Yeah, I think the playoffs have been phenomenal. And back, staying focused on the Utah Jazz and the fallout from the draft lottery. It's funny because expectations really shape everything. And the expectation was like, all right, this tanking process is going to be worth it. We're going to get a good enough pick. Even if it's not number 1, you're going to get a good enough pick that it's going to feel like this tanking process was worth it. And then, of course, 5 comes up, and immediately the reaction is, well, that wasn't worth it. And it's interesting because that decision-making process extends now. All right, you're going to maximize this draft however you can, whatever the brass thinks is the right thing to do. They're going to try to get the best player they can, either at 5 or packaging and trying to move up, whether that's worth it or not. Again, above my pay grade. But then there's this conversation that, well, hey, next year's draft is even deeper and even, maybe even more impressive than this year's draft. There's maybe not the one generational player in the Cooper flag, but you go 7-8 deep and you're going to get something.
Yeah.
And if I'm running a franchise that is already kind of in the dumps a little bit from a win-loss standpoint, I might be like, well, what's another year of this? So I don't know. How does that calculus happen behind closed doors? Like, do you worry about the fan base extensively? Do you worry about the coach or the players losing enthusiasm? What's the process like, you think?
You know, OC, this is one of the greatest questions, and we could discuss this and bring in Jazz fans and let them, have their say. Some are bought in, but that was last year. And I think the disappointment was deep that, even a top 3 pick didn't happen after having their worst record in the NBA and the worst season in Jazz franchise history, 17 wins. Manufactured, yes. That a lot of players were healthy. It was just a moment of 5 months where they decided to go total youth and let them learn the hard way. But here's the other part. And OC, as you come into the market, the Jazz just used to be the thing, right? They were kind of the boss, along with collegiate athletics and BYU and Utah, and the Aggies had their moments as well. But now you got another player, and you just wonder, owned by Ryan Smith, and I think that's the most intriguing part. Does that push Ryan a little faster, or does hockey kind of protect the Jazz during this time? That to me is the unknown. Salt Lake is growing at a rapid rate. Olympics are coming back. What's the advertising dollar like? All those things, again, I go back to, above our pay grade, right? But it's intriguing to me that it has to be part of the equation and what Danny, Justin, and Ryan are thinking about how long will the Jazz fan base, kind of say, let's roll. We're with you. And this past year, you got to admit, you go to the arena, and I was at every one this year, and man, there were some blank nights on the road. Man, this is tough. The teams are not even even in a whisper of being on a rebuild or going to be, back fast in the East or the West. But God, give it to the Jazz fans. I mean, that place was jamming probably 99% of the time, where they got a great turnout. So that's the question too. I don't know how they respond. Maybe it depends on who the Jazz draft at 5, or like you said, do you use some of the picks in that bucket that Danny has, and can you bump yourself up and take a guy at 2 or 3 or 4 that you really have your eyes on? And then what do you do in free agency, and then what do you do trading some vets? Man, like to be inside that door on occasion, right? Just to kind of get those answers. But we're going to find out. But I think this is a lot of questions, a lot of potential. But also, I think the Jazz have to look, too, that they're young, and the rest of the West especially is aging, and except for OKC and probably Houston. And they've kind of done it the way the Jazz are trying to do it, and that's through the draft and through a lot of heartache. And, depending on what, Ryan wants to do, maybe that's the avenue they take, but we're going to find out.
When we had this conversation at the beginning of the show, a lot of the reaction I got, and I think it's a good point being made. I've kind of rejected the excuse, if you want to call it that NBA players don't want to be here in Salt Lake City. I just don't believe it. I've gotten to know Darren over the years, and he was an all-star. He was a great player, and he's still got a place here. He and his family still come back here a lot. He loves it. I know not everyone does, but he loves it here. You could find guys who love it here. Lowry loves it here. He's a great player. And I'm looking at these other teams, again, that are in the conference finals. Salt Lake is not a worse place to live than Minneapolis. I was born in Minneapolis. Salt Lake is not a worse place to live than Oklahoma City. It's not a worse place to live than Indianapolis. I know that all these places are different. New York is what it is. You can't compare Salt Lake City to New York. But I'm looking at these other teams that nobody says that about OKC. Nobody says that in a meaningful way about Minneapolis right now. You're around players a lot more than I am. Is that a narrative we need to put to bed, that, like, this is an excuse? This is why you're not going to have great things in Salt Lake City, because players don't want to be there. If you're willing to be in Minneapolis, you got to be willing to be in Salt Lake as well.
I think if you see an opportunity, OC, to win a ring, everything looks really good, right? Is Milwaukee a destination point? No, believe me. But Giannis Antetokounmpo pretty much was the destination point, and he most likely won't be again after Lillard's, Achilles tear, and that team's going to be turned upside down. I'd say it's a narrative that's old, honestly, OC. I heard it back during the Stockton Malone days, and several players would come up and say, hey, you go live there. You have to break it down into a couple of different segments. Like, okay, you play 41 home games. You're on the road for 41, and it's a 7-month season. Yeah, you're here to practice, and you've got open gym. But at the same time, you're supposed to play basketball for a 10-year stretch if you're really going to be good and you're going to have the longevity of a good NBA career. I don't see what the gripe is that much. God, you talk about dinner, you talk about bars, you talk about any restaurant you want. Downtown is exploding. Look what Ryan and Ashley are doing in the next 3 years as they, continue to build towards the Olympics. I don't buy it. If it's a black and white issue, look, it's that same conversation in other cities as well. But I think if you have the centerpiece of a player, and I'll be honest, being around the Jazz as long as I have and having a chance to be a part of the franchise, OC, honestly, the facilities are out of sight. Delta Center is special. There's history there. Fans show up, and you're right on top of the action. And it's going to be really intriguing to see how the seating is going to, turn out over these next few years for hockey after they give it a new facelift. But man, all the things you want as a player are right here. And I think that you just talked about D. Will. Yeah, stayed. Boozer is back in the conversation to come back and be a part of this franchise, right? And that tells me a lot. And he's got 2 twins heading off to Duke. Kind of intriguing, right?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Quincy Lewis came back to head up the alumni. The alums seem to be much more engaged with this franchise since Ryan took it. And I think it's a good thing. I think the Jazz are in a really good position, and they're moving in the right direction, engaging in the past, embracing what was, but trying also, OC, to kind of move it along. Well,
it's an intriguing time one way or another. I hope that the plan is to just try to win now, and we actually see Lowry on the floor. I know that they're not a Western Conference championship team next year, but you got good players. I want to see Walker for 82 games. I want to see Lowry for 82 games. I want to see what it looks like. So, and I know you do too.
You surprise some folks. You know what? You surprise people. What's Taylor Hendricks going to do? OC, how's he going to play after that horrific early season injury? Cody Williams going to have a chance to play in this league? We're going to find out real quick. And Walker. And what do you do with, Isaiah Collier and Keontae and Sexton? There's speed, there's athleticism, there's some scores. If you let them play, you may get the answer everybody wants. And you know what? If they don't do well, then what happens is you're right back basically trying to be competitive, but also have an opportunity to still get a high-level draft pick. Is it going to be the number 1? Hey, man, Dallas is there. I guarantee you, after they traded Luka, that city about rioted. And, then Kyrie tears the ACL. And all of a sudden, Lady Luck, I guess you want to call her, whatever, but 1.8% chance. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And they get the number 1.
Bowler, I'm not a believer in Lady Luck. I'm more of a conspiracy theorist than that. But
there you go. Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
There's a channel for that. Appreciate your time as always, sir. I thank you very much.
You bet, pal. Talk soon.
That's Bowler, Craig Bowler-Jack, the voice and the face of the Utah Jazz in so many ways, and NBA insider after all of his experience around the league. Always appreciate his perspective and his thoughts. Now we're going to get some unique thoughts. Sarah Todd in the room when the NBA draft lottery happened. Apparently it's above board, according to James, and Sarah was there, so she's going to tell us how it worked out, and I'm going to try to convince her that it was rigged. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. So people get upset. Some people get upset with me when I suggest that the NBA draft lottery is rigged. Although I do believe that I will confidently say that at least at one point it was rigged. Whether it still is up for debate. You could not convince me that there was no frozen envelope for Patrick Ewing to go to New York. You could not convince me after hearing Shaquille O'Neal on a podcast say, yeah, David Stern asked me in March whether I wanted to play somewhere hot or somewhere cold. And then the draft lottery happened, I think he said it was in June in 1992. Little truth teller, never hurt anybody. People get mad about it. Sarah Todd was in the room. We're going to try to get Sarah Todd on the show to talk about the process of how it actually goes down.
If she wants to be on the show.
Did we offend Sarah somehow?
I don't know. Like,
Sarah, you could just tell us.
We rescheduled after she wasn't able to do it on Thursday. For
Sarah, if James
I don't know what's going on.
or I have upset you
we
some
love
way,
you, Sarah. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe we aired the wrong grievance. Maybe
Did you say you liked the Sherlock Holmes books?
I didn't.
Is that what happened?
I said nothing of the sort. I did not offer any public support to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and counter her grievance that she aired very specifically on this program.
I'm not going to say it. I don't want to say it, but maybe this is it because she can't confirm that it wasn't rigged. Just kidding.
There it is, James.
Can't
there
even
it is.
say it with a straight face. So.
No, you just said it, and this is what you feel.
Except that she did with Spence.
No, yeah. I mean, look.
No,
she can't say anything
try
else.
Try her again here. Hopefully, you get an answer.
She doesn't get invited back into the room if she says, "Oh, this thing is totally rigged." So, I promise you, we're not going to ride that train with Sarah. I want to talk about the real fallout for the Utah Jazz. And, we've had that conversation with all of you, 877-353-0700 on the text line if you want to continue that conversation. For the Utah Jazz, we put the poll questions out. Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but most people that responded to the poll from last week would not support tanking again for the Utah Jazz. And obviously that it sounds terrible. How good would the next draft have to be for you to think like, all right, we'll try it one more time? Well, if you're not going to get number one anyway, then you got to believe that there's a generational talent in the top 5 and hope that as bad as it gets is number 5 and you're going to go ahead for number 5. At this point, you have to almost hope that other teams do their job poorly and evaluate the talent the wrong way, and that you and your personnel department are just better at the job than everyone else is. That's a weird thing to think. It's probably not a high percentage way to go about your business. But at the end of the day, what other options do you have? We've talked about it a lot. I don't think you can move up higher than 3, and I don't think that moving up all the way to 3 would end up being worth the cost of moving up to 3. I don't think you're going to get to number 2, although the San Antonio Spurs have different needs and a different franchise philosophy than a lot of teams do. But if they can, just through the process of reward that the NBA already issues after they had their injuries and whatnot, and they ended up getting the number 2 overall pick. If you could pick Dylan Harper and add him to Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox, even if positionally you're not super needy at the things that Harper is good at. What does Oklahoma City have? Oklahoma City's got a bunch of wing players, right? That are pretty darn good. SGA has his supporting cast. Like, if you have Victor Wembanyama, this alien, and then a bunch of high quality perimeter or wing players, that might be enough. It probably is enough, quite frankly. So I don't think you can get to 2. Would the process of getting to 3 be worth it? It probably would feel more worth it because it's a short-term kind of a deal than another 82 games of misery for your fan base. Playing the long game just sounds like an exhausting, daunting, terrible, boring process for Utah Jazz fans. And it was great to have Bowler on, because I've heard Bowler say this on Spence's show. I'm glad he brought it up again. The ownership group having stake in both the hockey team and the NBA team is unique in the market. There's not a lot of markets that's the case. I don't know if there's another market that has both the NBA and NHL franchise owned by the same group. When I say I don't know, I'm not expressing doubt. I legitimately don't know if there's another city in America where they own both and they compete against one another, which is not really competition, right? But Bowler has talked about that. Like, if you're going to ask for more patience, how patient are people willing to be when they could just be like, oh, you know what? I have my $10,000 I'm willing to spend on tickets for a Jazz season. I'm just going to move those over to hockey. I really, truly don't know how that works out. And Bowler, I think, maybe has a concern or two about it because he's brought it up on multiple shows, multiple times. The draft lottery process is what it is. The rules are not set up in a way, whether you think there's a conspiracy or not, the rules are not set up in a way that you can control your own destiny enough to make it worth tanking, which means you have to just put the guys on the floor that you think give you the best chance of winning, make it look like you're trying, and maybe that effort leads to some results. And if it doesn't, you're just back in the lottery next year. And maybe you could hit on the 1.8% chance. Maybe then the conspiracy is in favor of the Utah Jazz and A.J. DeBonsa staying in Utah. Maybe when Adam Silver has a conversation with DeBonsa in March, would you rather play somewhere cold or somewhere hot? He's like, well, I like the cold. I like Utah. Enough said, kid.
All right.
I saw you doing some research, James. Were you able to yield anything?
Yeah, David Blitzer, the former RSL majority owner.
Yeah.
He is the owner of this Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils.
Okay.
So not in the same market, but NBA, NHL.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Kind of in the same market, though.
I'm not. Yeah, because New Jersey, there's a lot of overlap with Philadelphia sports fans and New Jersey Devils fans,
especially
formerly
Eastern Pennsylvania. Like, there's no Philadelphia NHL franchise.
Oh, the Flyers.
Oh, wait, there is a Philadelphia.
The Philadelphia Flyers,
but the Flyers. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's
But there are a fair amount of Philadelphia area fans that are New Jersey Devils fans, though, even though they've got the Flyers.
I'm embarrassed to tell you that the reason I know that is when I land in Philadelphia to go to Atlantic City when we have fights in Atlantic City. You can't it makes no sense to fly to Atlantic City because you got to go like New York first or whatever. So you fly to Philly, and when you're walking through the Philadelphia airport, there's like, you know how the airports, they'll have the pro shops in there for the local teams. You'll get Devils gear and Flyers gear. Gosh.
Yeah, I had a friend who grew up in Philly, but he was a New Jersey Devils fan. He told me why they're named the New Jersey Devils. Apparently, there's an urban myth about the New Jersey Devil.
You didn't know about the Jersey Devil?
I didn't know until he told me about it.
There was a video game about a Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
Let me look that up. Well, I think that was on the PlayStation, the original. Yep, Jersey Devil on the PS1. That looks like a dumb game, if we're being honest. It's just like, yeah, okay. The Jersey Devil cryptid. Should we get into this?
Why not?
Urban legend. Since we got snubbed by Sarah Todd again.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with
There's
Sarah.
A conspiracy.
On Thursday she did text like 10 minutes later, "Hey, I'm ready now." She's not sent one of those texts back today, so I don't know what's going on.
So it's basically described as a flying biped with hooves. So a goat-like creature with wings that stands on 2 feet. That is terrifying.
That is terrifying.
That is. I don't want to read any more about
we
this.
have now given everyone nightmares.
I don't want to talk about this anymore. The Wikipedia page is extensive for the Jersey Devils.
It is not anything. It doesn't look anything like what the New Jersey Devils have used for their branding. That's its namesake, but they've gone to like Devils pitchfork type Devils with their branding.
Okay, I'm scared
like
now. Yeah, the Jersey Devils, they had a nice little run in the early 2000s.
Yes, Martin Brodeur. Shout out.
Scott Stevens was
another good one.
An absolute monster to watch on ice. Like, that's one of those people.
One of the great defensemen of his era, right?
Exactly. And just so physical. Like sometimes you'll watch the NFL and you'll be like, well, yeah, all these guys are big and scary. But then there's like a James Harrison where you're just like, oh, my goodness.
I don't even want to be near that guy.
I would never mess with that guy.
Or in the 70s, the way they talk about Mean Joe Green.
Mean Joe Green, right? Like
another Steeler.
The Mike Singletaries of the world, where you're just like Ronnie Lott. You
watched one press conference. I watched one press conference with Mike Singletary, and not the one everyone's thinking of when you say press conference. Just a regular press conference where he's not mad at anybody, and he's intimidating. Yeah.
Stevens retired as the all-time leader in games skated as an NHL defenseman, but then he was passed. Zdeno Chara and Chris Chelios ended up passing him up.
Those are great hockey names, by the way. Great hockey legends, the two of them. But Zdeno Chara, especially because he's a Bruin for a long time.
I always had a distaste
Chris
for Chara.
Chelios. Yeah.
Because he was odd to look at on skates because he was too tall.
Oddly tall.
I didn't like it. He's like 6'9" in real life, and then he puts on skates.
Yeah, you don't see really tall hockey players. They're not short by any means, but you don't see like really tall hockey players. Yeah.
I don't like it. I didn't like it, and I still don't like it. Yeah, the Rangers have one of these guys right now, Matt Rempe, 6'9".
Oh my gosh, it's like the 6'9" pitcher we've gotten every once in a while in baseball.
How tall was Randy Johnson?
I believe he was 6'9". Maybe he was 6'7", somewhere.
Randy Johnson 6'10".
6'10".
Oh, dude, no, it just doesn't look right.
It doesn't. Now it helped that he was like more of a sidearm delivery, because some of the other guys, and none of them near as famous as Randy Johnson, but some of the other guys, there was one that played for the Rays. I'm thinking of. I can't think of his name, but he was another 6'9" guy who threw the traditional overhand delivery, and it looked really wrong. Like, it looked wrong seeing the guy that tall on the pitcher's mound. It looked even more wrong with his arm all the way over the top, that traditional delivery. Randy Johnson, it almost looked more aesthetically pleasing because he had more of a sidearm delivery, and it was like, okay, you don't look 7'5" now when you put your arms up, because you're not putting your arm all the way up when you throw.
Anyway, Chara and Rempe, by the way, tied for tallest player in NHL history. I just looked it up.
All right.
I don't know if it's good to be the tallest in history in whatever league you're in. I don't know how many of those guys end up being like all-time greats, but Chara figured it out.
Chara was great.
Who's the tallest player in NFL history, you think?
Oh. It's got to be a quarterback, I would think. Maybe an O-lineman, I suppose.
The tallest player in NFL
Drew Bledsoe,
history.
Maybe? No?
Ooh. You know what? 877-353-0700. If you know who the tallest player in NFL history is, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to text it in right now, and then I'll automatically give you something cool, a James Peterson bonus point. But
nothing cooler than that.
I'll give you the answer. We'll take a break. I'll give you the answer. We'll give away golf next. I'll ask another trivia question.
Okay, that won't be for golf. Okay.
That's not for golf. But the tallest player in NFL history, I'll tell you who that was, and I'll ask a good trivia question pertinent to the actual show next. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show, wrap it up here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700. I underestimated the knowledge of our listeners, or perhaps the ability for them to Google the answer to that random trivia question I just asked. Spence Checketts is just getting his headphones on. He's here in studio getting ready for the drive. I'm going to give away some golf. 18 holes to El Monte. Festival of Tees is brought to you by the Utah Golf Association and Mountain America Credit Union. This is a callback to an earlier conversation we had on the show today. 4 quarterbacks in college football are returning to play in 2025 who rushed for more than 1,000 yards in 2024. Who is the second most productive of those quarterbacks? I'm making it easy for you. 18 holes to El Monte. Make sure you're listening live. But also, if you missed the show today and you're just tuning in now for the drive, you can find the whole show on the app, on demand at ESPN 700. You could tell your smart speaker to just play ESPN 700. I also asked a random trivia question. Who's the tallest player in NFL history? Because we got off on a little bit of a tangent. Spence Checketts, can you answer that one for me? Your producer texted me, and he answered it. But I know he Googled because it took him too long to answer.
Is it a tight end? Is it a tight end?
You would think so, right? Actually, the tallest guy in NFL history played defensive line, which is like the worst possible position.
I don't know that I even have a guess.
He played 1 year for the Raiders. His name is Richard Sly.
No, you could have given me a million guesses.
He was 7 feet tall.
A 7-footer?
Why would you play defensive line if you were 7 feet tall? Then they get under your pads.
I was going to say, you've got to get low.
Low man wins.
It's impossible.
It's all about pad level. Actually, this is funny because Brighton High School had when I was in high school, Brighton had a kid who was like 6'10" who was playing D-line for them. And he was easy to block.
Yeah, I would think so.
He couldn't get into a low stance.
Did he also play basketball?
Yeah, he was like a good basketball player.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened to him. I forget his name, but if you're 6'10" and you don't end up playing D1, like what happened?
I mean, if you just would have asked me to guess the height of the tallest player in NFL history, I don't think I would have gone past 6'8". I had no idea there was a 7-footer. And 6'8" is even ridiculously tall, unless you're like a really fast tight end or something.
I actually don't think that Richard Sly should get credit because he made the team for 1 year. And so he's like the factoid. 1967, come on. But there's the Detroit Lions currently have a guy his name's Dan Skipper. He's 6'10", plays offensive tackle.
Huh.
That makes a little more sense because he probably have super long arms.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Still, that's a tall dude to be playing football.
Wild.
Mostly the basketball coaches in high school would have saw him in the hallway and said, "Son, you're playing basketball now."
Yes.
How was your weekend, Sean?
It was fine. How was yours?
It was good. Good. A little golf.
Yeah.
A little concert action. I told you I was at Kilby Court on Saturday night. By far the oldest person there.
That's okay.
Until Weezer started playing.
There's got to be an oldest person there in every room. There's got to be someone who's the oldest.
Yeah, so I was telling you, I showed
You're
up.
the oldest person here also.
No, that's true. I do feel like the patriarch of the radio station. That's
fair.
Task I take seriously.
That's fair.
Showed up a little early, about 5 or 6, walked around listening to bands I'd never heard of with a bunch of high schoolers. Got some food, and then Weezer started and the other olds showed up. So it was enjoyable. Little rain, but not too bad. It was a good weekend.
All right. Little concert in the rain. You're dedicated. That's great.
Yeah, Weezer's, they haven't changed since 1994. I mean, you're going to hear about sweaters unraveling and such. It's the same act as it has been for a long time. But a few Game 7s, one in the NBA, one in the NFL. The NBA is moving into this era of absolute parity, and the Utah Jazz are so unprepared to be a part of it that it really is such a bummer.
Well, noticing that 3 of the 4 final franchises here don't have a Larry O'Brien trophy in the trophy case. It's like, okay, hey, anybody can do it.
It'll be the 7th straight year we have a different NBA champ.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild. And Minnesota, Indiana, we've got smaller cities. We have OKC. And, the next 4 or 5 years until they recalibrate to decide if they want to change the CBA is going to be a prime opportunity for smaller markets with owners that don't have a ton of money to capitalize, and the Jazz just aren't ready at all. And it just sucks. It's too bad.
I know it's a tired narrative, but I want to leave you with this. can we put to bed, because of what we're seeing with OKC and Minnesota, and we saw from Milwaukee and Indianapolis, can we put to bed the idea that, like, you're not going to be able to do it in 2025 in Salt Lake City? People don't want to play there. People don't want to live there. OKC and Minneapolis are not markedly better nightlife markets than Salt Lake City is.
No, not at all. I mean, if you extend it back to your point, Giannis in Milwaukee, Jokic in Denver, right? I mean, the majority of the best teams in pro basketball right now aren't necessarily, like, Miami's down. The Lakers have LeBron and Luka. Obviously, the Knicks are back to a place, but they haven't been there in 25 years. We're going to talk about it on the show, and we have two really good guests. Like right now is the best time to be constructing a roster in pro basketball without being in a destination market, but you have to be prepared, like Oklahoma City is, like Indiana apparently is, like Minnesota has been, and we'll see what happens with Milwaukee and Giannis. The problem is the Jazz aren't prepared to take advantage of it, and I don't know how they're going to get this thing turned around. Let me ask you this.
Okay.
So San Antonio reportedly is hanging on to two. They're going to draft Dylan Harper. They're going to put him next to Stephon Castle, let him learn from De'Aaron Fox, which is an embarrassment of riches. Philly apparently.
You didn't even mention Victor Wembanyama to get to the embarrassment of riches.
I was talking about the guard line.
I know
what
you're talking about. That's how terrifying that is.
Right. And, all of them are young. They should be great for a decade. But if Philly is – so Jeremy Wu from ESPN reported today that Philly's willing to move on from three, and the two names he threw out there were Kevin Durant and Lauri Markkanen. If you're the Jazz, do you straight up trade Lowry for three and then just simply get salary fillers to make the deal work? And then just, okay, we got 3 and 5. All right, we got 3 and 5. And maybe that's VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson. I don't know. Maybe it's Ace Bailey and I don't know who the names are. But, I mean, that is a signal that we are really starting this thing right now with two really young players. So you're not going to get back anything of note, okay? Because the other piece of the report was Philly might move on from Paul George. Jazz have no interest in that. I mean, that's a linear move. I think Paul George, when healthy, is a better player than Markkanen, but you get the premise. If Philly's willing to move on from three, you call Philly and say, we'll give you Markkanen, just send us salary fillers, send us 3, and maybe a future first. And then here we go.
And you get to keep 5?
Yeah, you hang on to 5. There's no way you're trading 5 and Lowry for 3. You hang on to 5. You say, we'll send you Markkanen, send us 3. Give us some salary fillers, and give us a future first. Do you do that if you're the Jazz?
Yes.
You might have to.
And I love Lauri Markkanen, and I love that he loves Salt Lake City. I think that does matter. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, because, yes. I mean, yes. If you're talking about, if this draft is as good at the top as everyone's been talking about, you get 2 bites at an apple saying, like, hey, we think that there's 5 or 6 players that are going to be 10-year greats or very, very good, all-stars in the NBA, and you could get 2 shots at selecting one, maybe you hit on both, yeah, you got to do it.
Last thing before I set you loose, and I've heard you talk a little bit about this, but you're a Niners guy. $53 million per year for Brock. I know you have to do it, but did it have – like, he now makes more than Jared Goff per year, Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar has more guaranteed money overall. But you put Jared, I think he's right behind Tua, and maybe that's where he belongs. But he's not better than some of the other guys. Are you? I'm sure you're glad they locked him up.
I'm not.
Did the number surprise you?
I'm bothered by the whole thing.
You are, okay.
Because it is like, yes, you have to do it.
Yeah.
But you already saw this last year, before you paid him, the downside of having a star-laden roster. There's no depth with the San Francisco 49ers, right? Trent Williams goes down. The rest of your offensive line is paid $9. You know what I mean? Kittle is overpaid now, and I love Kittle, but now he's overpaid. Christian McCaffrey couldn't play for you this year. You've got all that money locked up with Christian McCaffrey. You don't have the same mechanism that the NHL does where that salary comes off the books if someone goes on IR. Like, the 49ers this last season experienced the downside of having a star talent-heavy roster, and now you're doing that with another $50 million against your books. That is terrifying for me.
Yeah, I don't know what the alternative would have been, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts now that we know the contract.
That's the downside. Is the alternative is you think that you hit on another draft pick when you got lucky hitting on him as Mr. Irrelevant.
Right.
So you can't hope is not a strategy, right?
Yep.
So you had to pay him, and unfortunately you had to overpay him. And it does inform my next contract negotiation, because for Brock Purdy, he now gets more per week than he made in the first part of his entire career. So I'm going for that.
That's so wild. That's a good tactic. You know what? I'm going to do that too.
I'm going to be like, I want as much per week as you've been paying per year. I
wish you the best of luck with that tactic.
Is that going to work?
Well, you know what? I'm going to withhold comment.
Stay tuned for The Drive. The Sean O'Connell Show is done. Let's do it again tomorrow. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.